I'm not hearing anything.
I'm not either. Did the thing not?
Did you not
Oh my
share
God.
audio?
Did it?
So getting back to
Oh, curses!
how Mouse ruined comics.
Okay.
All right, 30 seconds. Your 30 seconds are up. No more boomer music.
This is how Rhys ruined his show 2 weeks running.
That's pretty
Actually, if you manage to get that on the stream, can we please cut that audio and use it in a future video?
That's pretty top tier.
So,
That's pretty good.
Here's the question. You guys out there in internet land, do you all remember a couple of years ago when I used to have a show that like was more or less on time, and we had the theme song that loaded up on the regular, and I didn't fumble it every single time I opened up?
Actually, no, I don't.
Yeah.
I've never been on that show.
Yeah.
On brand. It's very on brand.
It is.
You have a different show, maybe?
No. I feel like I'm more of a failure now than I used to be, but
so
that also
human.
makes sense. Yeah, something. I'm aging. So, anyhow, today's show, ladies and gents, today's show is it's a CANON-ade. And I was going to recite the Ghost of Stephen Foster by the Squirrel Nut Zippers, but I didn't get that prepared long enough ahead of time. So you guys who know the song can laugh at my joke, and the rest of you can dig into the topic. Today, we are actually, does somebody want to waste time for a little bit? Because I forgot to share the link out earlier. I'm interrupting myself.
Wasting time.
Where's is the topic? I thought, are we just talking Aquaman 2, or did we move on to something else?
We moved on to something else because other people found the other idea more interesting.
Because I showed up and I was like, yeah, I'm ready to talk Aquaman 2. That's a good movie.
So let's start with some introductions.
I like Aquaman 2.
Tonight we have Rhys.
Hey, everybody. How's it going? It's my show, but I don't know what's happening. Okay, I'll tell you the story. The story of why the show is the show that it is today is that we were originally supposed to have Mike Barron on, and Mike got a hold of me over the weekend. I think it even may have been Sunday night, and he just realized that he had that he had something come up in IRL, and so he couldn't make it after all, and we rescheduled. We're doing it March 8th, I think. May 8th. March. So it's a year. A full year.
It's back in time.
Once I build that time machine, we're gonna have a great show. But no, we're doing it in May. He's gonna be coming on then to talk about the upcoming project and talking about Nexus and all kinds of stuff. And so that's the thing. But we didn't have a backup plan for today. So I spent Monday and Tuesday at work trying to think of what we could have a show about. And so this morning at 7:00, I'm like, okay, guys, I owe you all a huge apology because I have nothing to talk about. And so we made some stuff up. I threw out two suggestions. One was I did finally see Aquaman 2 after being badgered into it. And it's pretty good. It's pretty good.
I liked it.
I liked it a lot. It wasn't flawless. It wasn't the best thing I've ever seen, but it was pretty good.
I mean, it's the best DC Universe film. It's in the top running for the best thing the DC Universe has put out in.
Can I say that
I don't know
the DCU seems to
we're talking Snyderverse at least
on the rare occasion.
I think it may be the best Snyderverse picture. I had the fewest complaints. I really enjoyed the first Aquaman like a lot. Sorry to just talk over your cartoon kids. So I'll get the floor back in a second. I really enjoyed it the first time I saw it, and I loved it so much. I bought it when it came out the first week. I took it home. I showed it to my wife, and she was sort of kind of like into the thing until that Pitbull song came on. Pitbull, and it just actually I didn't realize it while going the first time, but that really does dive bomb the movie for a while.
Just crashes it a bit.
It's so cringy that it's just like, oh my god. Nothing against Pitbull. I hear he's a really nice person who goes out of his way to help his community. Great. But
I don't even remember that. When was that?
Yeah, it's where they fly over Africa. I think it's actually Pitbull doing a version of Africa.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
But it's like It's just really bad.
Like Toto's Africa.
Oh, is that
Yeah,
where they're
I
going
think
to
so.
like wait.
Oh, it's like a remixed Toto's Africa with
Yeah.
rap over it.
Yeah.
Oh
think
yeah,
that's
that's horrible.
That
Yeah,
was horrible. Yeah.
yeah. How much better to just have Africa? But
Yeah. If they just had the Toto version, it'd have been amazing.
No, it's got to be modern because it's a
But-
remix.
yeah.
Well,
But I
mean,
agree.
and I hear that James Wan is like really into hip hop, like
Yeah.
so that's a thing. And okay, it's his movie.
Here's the thing: the amount of cringing that I've done at certain other DCEU projects. I mean, like I said, it's just no comparison. In my book.
No, I mean, I would think my part of my feeling is that the first Aquaman movie, if you're willing to accept the level, a certain level of cheese that is just endemic to superhero movies, it's almost flawless except for that musical choice. That musical choice is so bad that it and I didn't realize the first time I watched it because I was so hyped on everything else.
Yeah.
But the second, third time I watched it, I'm like, that really is that is so jarring.
Yeah.
I liked it better because people talked about Shazam as being like, oh, the best DCEU film. I was so utterly disappointed in Shazam. I was just sad walking out of that picture, and I know
Really?
yeah, I really feel like it missed the boat on like everything.
Shazam was an annoying kind of mess that left me not quite sure if I had just watched a masterpiece or absolute trash.
I mean, I guess
Because it's
again,
literally two movies in one.
I think my problem, yeah, well, my problem is different.
Like there are parts of it that are absolutely great.
The family stuff's fine. Yeah, that stuff's fine, and that stuff works. But it's like, I mean, it's like the whole, Fast and the Furious joke, family. Okay, we get it. My problem is that it is a tonal disaster.
Yeah, exactly.
And they, because of tone and the absence of its Puritan roots. And the creator wasn't, again, I'm not saying the creator was like a super conservative, but he was super influenced by a kind of Puritan, New England Puritan kind of, not New England, but like a Christian consensus sort of upbringing. I think the original creator of Captain Marvel was like the son of a minister or something. And so like you see those influences and things with like the 7 deadly sins being actually like in the bloody like characters, and stuff. And when they try to bring that to the screen, Hollywood has no idea what to do with the concept of the 7 deadly sins.
Yes.
And so all they can do is make them into the most generic CGI monsters, and that's it. They're like, and in the comics, it would like, Envy, when Envy was unleashed on the world, like she would actually go and like, make people envious of other people. When Lust came in, how would you?
Right.
How would you make the lust demon into a demon in current day Hollywood? You can't do anything with that. Like, without embracing a kind of Christian consensus idea of what morality is, which modern Hollywood just can't abide. All you can do with the 7 deadly sins, like I said, is and that's all they all end up being. And you can't tell the difference between any of them. They're just generic gargoyle looking monsters that aren't particularly well crafted in CGI. It was embarrassing.
Right.
And so, and that just turns them into horror monsters in your kids' movie. One of them, Savannah has, I think, one of them tear out his father's throat. And so they're going,
no, he's throwing his brother out a 50-story window. They're eating people alive.
That's what I'm saying. It's that's what I'm saying. It's a tonal disaster because it's like these are
in a movie about kids turning into superheroes.
Yeah,
Right.
And it was just such a clash. And at the very end,
but that's why I say though that it's like two different movies because it'll go from that.
Oh, you mean tonally? I'd agree with that.
Well,
tonally.
and I mean, and part of the reason for that is, and I will squarely blame Jeff Johns for this.
Oh, you mean his New 52 run?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because what they wanted to do is they wanted to have the joy and the vitality of classic Captain Marvel, right? Of Otto Binder and all those guys doing classic Captain Marvel, while having the edgy now New 52 that Johns was so invested in. Right.
I kind of liked that. I know you hate it. I know you do.
It's obscene.
Where Billy Batson is not a good kid, and he argues that there are no good kids. and so he's like, what is good? He's like,
I wouldn't
a
mind
complete undermining of the as he said, the
pitch,
Christian creation of the character.
But the pitch of the fact that you have a modern, if you're going to do a modern sort of recasting, and it's like he doesn't start off good, he has to learn how to be good. I'm kind of okay with that.
Yeah, well, and
that part didn't bug me.
And that's what they do in the movie.
Here's the thing for me that would be really appealing on that idea. In the comics, I'm more forgiving in the movie because we're dealing with a truncated time frame, so you kind of have to deal with the shorthand the audience knows.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. But when it comes to in the comics, if you had a situation where Billy does not have the mental space as a child, as we've seen Billy, to ask what is good, right? Yeah. That is a Captain Marvel question with the wisdom of Solomon, right? Starting to really question himself, and the wizard Shazam says I picked you to be Captain Marvel because you had a good heart, and then then Captain Marvel to look at his hands and say, what is a good heart, right? That's a wisdom of Solomon kind of issue. I would welcome that in that format, but not punk ass 16-year-old Billy Batson who's been grifting people for his whole life. Right. I just
I think I was more bothered. I think I was more bothered by the take on Savannah, both in the film.
I am also bothered by that, but once again,
they wasted Strong. Strong's good casting, I think.
No, you're absolutely right, But the reason you got that Savannah, the reason you got that Savannah is because DiDio and Johns wanted to make Captain Marvel the magic Superman. And so that was their whole deal: is we can't have two Superman. That's stupid. We can't have a guy named Dick. That's stupid. So we can't have a magic suit. We can't have two Supermen. That's stupid. So we have to make one the Superman of magic and the Superman of science. It's just like, that's just
and so
dumb.
His Lex Luthor can't be a science guy. He's got to be a magic guy.
Exactly.
Even though they Savannah is kind of what Lex Luthor grew from, even though Luthor
I will say
he's kind of grew out of Savannah, but go ahead. Sorry,
no, that was my bad. Sorry. I did before we move on and probably talk about other things. I did want to mention that I did like how the films, because I only saw the first one. I did love the nod to Mr. Mind.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I love Mr. Mind. He's totally silly but kind of cool, and the way they pulled him in that stinger made him legit. But then apparently, they just passed on that, did something else, and then they again put him in an end stinger and then canceled the franchise.
Yeah.
So that's the last we'll see of Mr. Mind for gosh knows how long.
Yeah, and this whole Shazam thing, I think one of the reasons we liked it was that it was tonally better than the DCEU stuff that had been coming so far that was so dark. It was like this is more what I like. But it is a tonal mess, but it is brighter. I mean, they even brightened up the Superman when he cameos at the end. The costume is way brighter than, what we saw in Man of Steel. So it's kind of like moving away from Man of Steel. I like it. If they could do Shazam and he's not in the DCU EU connected at all, rather than all the connections they tried to do, they tried to put him in the JSA at the last minute. They tried to, it's like, I didn't need any of that. And that's what really kind of sank it, is that they set it up and they make a bleak reference to Black Adam. Then they make a Black Adam movie, and The Rock says he wants to fight Superman, not Shazam. He doesn't understand Black Adam. I mean, he doesn't understand this is Shazam's enemy. This is why you're setting it up. So What is that? I'm sorry.
This was mainly my biggest issue after he, slaughtered an entire boardroom full of people.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
so you need me to zoom in.
Yeah.
I was just again, it's just like why are we having our teenage superhero fight this murderer?
Yeah.
You just like I said, the tonally. You know what's funny, Hutch? Now that you bring that up, the thing that really saved Aquaman, both 1 and 2, is how James Wan completely removed those films, they might as well be in a separate continuity for all they reference.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They're such independent films, and you walk into both of them, you don't need to have seen like anything else. Like I think there's like one or two like passing pieces of dialogue that technically like make a mention, but you could drop those pieces of dialogue and enjoy them. My wife who watched them and just and enjoyed them, and she's just a normie. And it's a testament to the fact that film made like $1 billion, and everyone was shocked. They're like, why did Aquaman make $1 billion? And it was like, it's not that hard.
So,
one of the things that
standalone movie.
so the
and Jason Momoa's
one
abs
last thing on
did a lot of it.
one last tack on the Aquaman thing before we get on to the real topic. I have been when I came into comics, I was a fan of superheroes as a kid, watched the Super Friends cartoon shows, I watched reading comics in the newspaper, all that kind of stuff. But it was when I was 11, I got into floppy books and got back into superheroes. I kind of had not been a fan of superheroes for a little while in there. And when I got back into Aquaman, it was Peter David's Aquaman, and I loved the storytelling, the big, cross generational scope of the story. I loved it, and I looked back on the Silver Age origin of Aquaman, where he's got the human father and the Atlantean mother, and I was like, it just seems kind of hokey, and it's so much like Namor, and I just don't know that I'm how really keen I am on it. And when they brought that back in the New 52, I was like, okay. And I did feel like that the Peter David and later stories didn't give enough, space and time to who Tom Curry was as a character. I felt like that they really shortchanged him as a character, but I also know that they were building on these previous sets of stories, and so they may have taken away his genetic tie to Arthur, but not his familial tie, and those are referenced even though they're not really heavily dealt with. I was like, okay, we can let that slide. But it wasn't until like Aquaman the movie that James Wan really like changed my mind on that whole thing. And he did it not by having the previous version of the story prior to Peter David's was you had the living dad and the dead mom, and then the dad died. And like that's like really a bummer. But what Wan did is that everybody lives. Right?
No, right? It's such a rare thing in a Hollywood superhero.
And it makes sense. And so you had the idea that, okay, so Tom raises Arthur by himself after this tragic loss, and he thinks he's lost it. He never gives up hope. He's just got this, like, she's the one for me, and if I ever find her again, but if I don't, at least we had what we had, and I'll mourn her, and this is the life I want to live. There's never another one like Atlanta. And so they had this whole this sorrow over everything, and he brings it around to the happiest of endings in the first movie in a way that like is totally organic, right? So I watched the second movie, and I was first of all, I was very much like okay with like how it ended. And I was not dedicated to watching the second movie, because I'm so annoyed with Hollywood. I like don't even want to go to the theater anymore. The whole business, I'm just sick of it all. Those guys can just die. But some of the guys on this panel and some other guys out on the internet really badgered me. Said, "God, it's really good. It's really good. No, just shut up and watch the movie. You'll like it." Okay. So I checked it out, and the very beginning of the movie is Arthur just hating everything in the world except being a husband and a dad, right? Like everything in the world is crap except home. And I'm just like, this is my new favorite movie.
I thought you were going to say they like kill her off in the first 5 minutes.
No, they did it. They do. They not only that, they actually not only don't kill the villain in the first movie. He comes back and has a whole sort of redemption arc. And that's where it leans into the family side of it, and that's cheesy. But you know what? It's such a refreshing change of pace from just one and done, kill the villain at the end. So I just
The thing
because
is-
of that, it stands out.
The thing is it's cheesy, but the one of the things I loved about the movie, and this is no spoilers on that, is that they do it in a way that doesn't eliminate or negate the consequences of the things that happened in the first movie.
Mhm.
Right? Atlanta, you know, she's gregarious, she's forgiving, she loves her kids, right? And even though like they both live with different kinds of consequences because the different kinds of choices they've made, that like that's never like taken away from it. There's this aspect of it that's in there, and I'm just like, and so like I'm not even the level of like it's family cheese doesn't even bother me at all because of the situation that we're still dealing with these heavy consequences, right?
Mhm.
Like that's, I mean, like, you know, Ocean Master is on the run probably for the rest of his life, and he's like started to understand like, oh, this is all my fault. You know, and he's like owning the whole thing. So
I think that I don't know if this is the Ocean Masters post what do you say, post New 52 post rebirth thing, where Alana is taken back to where she's recaptured by Atlantis and goes back to give birth to him. Is that in canon? Because that's
yeah, well,
what we're talking about is things that are from the movies that are being put into canon in the comics. But I don't know if they did that first. But what I like is that solves the big problem of how up until that, the problem of how to do Orm as the brother doesn't work because originally he was just a surface guy who was the child of Arthur's second, or pardon me, Tom Curry's second wife. And so they're kind of half brothers, and he's a surface guy who doesn't breathe underwater, and he wants to rule the ocean. It doesn't make any sense. You know, that's the Silver Age Ocean Master makes no sense. This solves that. And they've been trying to do that where, like in the cartoon, he was an Atlantean brother, and this it's like I miss that she dies on the surface from a Earth illness, but I kind of like it, like you say, that Tom thinks she's out there somewhere and could come back, and he doesn't remarry, and meanwhile she has to give birth to and so you've got Arthur's the firstborn, and the younger brother's the purebred, and that's a true fight for who's going to rule Atlantis, you know.
That's
That's great. It's a better origin than what they've done in the comics, unless that was a Jeff Johns thing in the movie. I don't know.
I think part of that was the Jeff Johns thing, but one of the things that and I have not read all of John's New 52 run, but my understanding is that is for the stuff that I've read, Atlanta like comes back because like she is captured and she's not dead in the New 52, but like she and Tom like never like reconnect, and then Tom is savagely murdered by somebody because Jeff Johns loves killing parents.
Right.
I just remember the Trench, and the Trench are a really nice addition. They're really threatening.
The Trench were a really nice
and
addition.
they're really cool.
The Trench were a really nice addition, but nothing in the previous canon disallowed somebody to invent the Trench anyway. And so that's one of the things is just like the New 52 Aquaman canon is so unnecessary. It doesn't add anything to the greater lore. And the person that does was James Wan in keeping both parents alive and reunited. Like that's the thing. But anyway, that's the opposite.
Before we go to the true thing, is this all we'll ever talk about Aquaman 2? Is this the only?
Oh, I'm sure not.
Because I haven't had a chance to say it, really. I mean, my opinion is this movie is great in the way it's self-contained. If they put out a DVD 2-pack or whatever format 2-pack, 10 years from now, that is going to hold up a lot better when it's divorced from, but the whole DCEU is over, and the DCEU and the Flash movie was bad, and the Shazam 2 was bad. It's like you forget all that and watch these two together. It's pretty good. I think the second one could have been better. There's definitely a lot of stuff that could have been better, but there's a lot of stuff that I loved. I love that they found a way to make Topo work.
Oh yeah!
I think funny. I think it's funny. He's shouting for Topo, and it's like, dude, you're a telepath. Did you forget that?
Well, you can't. Yeah, I wish they had done a little more with his telepathy in the movie. To be perfectly honest,
There's one telepathy scene in each movie, and that's
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I wish they'd done more with it. But I also understand, that like they're kind of trying to move away from the Super Friends kind of thing a little bit. But
Actually, I
that
disagree.
but that would have been. I think that would have been great. The other thing is that like in those scenes you get to see like Momoa pull out like his action and comedic chops like together.
Yeah.
And like marry them in such a way that is just...
And he's I have to say that although like I know that they're doing a different casting decision with the whole like Maori thing, Hawaiian aspect to him.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to hate on Momoa because he very clearly is happy to be a superhero.
Yes.
He's just he's so happy, and he's clearly like just pleased as punch that he gets this opportunity to play a superhero. And I don't know, it's infectious.
Well, so and here's one of the here's something I gotta talk on this for a second. Is the racial casting on the whole deal?
Yeah.
Right. Is that when they first announced Momoa was going to play Aquaman, I was a little irritated, right? Because Curry is an Irish name, and a lot of the incidental stuff in Aquaman going back decades has been in that Northern Atlantic Sea culture. In the Boston, the Maine, the Ireland, the Cornwall of all of it, right? And so these are my people. I mean, I grew up on the plains, but we came over across the ocean, for crying out loud. But anyway, point being, I was a little irritated about it, but it was one of those things where the stuff I'd seen Momoa in, and when I saw him doing interviews, he had such a passion for it. And I found out later that he's actually half Irish. Like his white family, like he is Irish and he's Irish and Hawaiian. So that's the whole thing.
Interesting.
So I was like, well, that's interesting. And so then when I heard that, I said, so maybe they're gonna do like the Atlantean people are gonna lean on his island heritage, and then they're gonna play the land people with the Irish side of his heritage and play with it that way. And I'm like, okay, that'd be kind of cool. But I heard Nicole Kidman was being cast as Atlanta, and I'm like, well, they're not doing that.
The whitest white woman you can get is
so the absolute whitest white woman.
How do you get him out of that?
Yeah.
That union. Yeah.
Well, and so then they had a Jango Fett plays that. Well, the funny thing about that is that his last name's Morrison. His real last name's Morrison, which is an Irish last name. So I'm just like, so what exactly is the cultural like hodgepodge this is all living in?
See,
they're drinking Guinness. They're toasting sriracha.
Maybe you could go with like the Disney's Atlantis version, where they're like the mix of everybody that everybody else came from.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I'm not sure, but the thing I love about it is that regardless of all of that kind of stuff, the fact that the cast just loves the whole property, they're like really buying into it.
It's not cynical.
It's not cynical. It's sincere. So that even like the cheesy stuff, you're like, this is like Indiana Jones level action stuff. It's great. It's great.
Yeah.
I've told you
like Arthur runs into a giant statue to make it turn into a bridge.
Yeah.
Like, of course that worked. Why wouldn't it?
I've told you about how the whole thing about him being the way they re-envisioned him for the dark DCEU, that he's going to be all tattoos and ditched all that look except for a little bit of orange and green in the armor that he's wearing, and that's it. And then he says, okay, there, I've made him this swearing, drunken, tough guy. He's 7 feet tall. He looks nothing like the blonde guy from the cartoons. Here you go, James Wan. And James Wan is like, put him in the armor. And it's like Super Friends all over again. You even have the little woo 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 coming off of him when he comes out in the armor and with the trident and everything, and he's riding a giant seahorse again. It's like, it's everything from the old cartoons. You're saying he's getting away from it. It's like, no. That's a good reference. Okay, there you go.
Yeah. Oh, geez, okay. I hadn't even picked up on that. That's hilarious.
And it's from Atlantis.
Exactly.
That's funny. Okay, that's all
Well,
I
that's
wanted
what-
to say about. I did my own
Well-
review of Aquaman already, but I had to. I just think that I got to put that together. I need to like get the cartoons and the footage from it and like make a mashup and do that on my own channel or something. I'll
Yeah,
let
Well,
you know.
what I want to add, if I will,
Go ahead.
especially particularly after the last two movies we've been talking about here, is how in like I don't know why it seems to be the case that when on the very occasion that a DC movie seems to do something right, and it's not very often, it always seems to be in the strangest of places. Shazam, Aquaman.
We are talking. It is important to say it's like this current era, right? Because DC had quite a few bangers before Snyderverse came
Yes,
out.
yeah, I'm talking about that. I literally
Well,
just watched for the first time last night. Black Adam?
Mhm.
It happened again. It already happened with Star Wars. Now it's happening again. The one movie in a sea of garbage that is out there that I could actually get invested in is the one everyone was saying was the worst piece of crap they had ever seen.
Are you saying you like The Last Jedi?
What? No.
Oh, okay. I
That would be
misunderstood.
that honor goes to the Solo movie.
Oh, okay.
Oh my god.
That's right.
Solo movie's
Okay.
garbage.
All right.
That
All right.
is right, people.
We need to jump to our actual topic, or we're
Okay,
gonna be here
so
all
we're
night.
talking about Aquaman. We're talking about this thing. It's actually a pretty good segue to what we wanted to discuss today, because the main topic that we came to talk about was looking at the comic books and superheroes more broadly have been in every medium possible, right? And with that, they have gained sometimes in adaptations, they've gained traits or ideas that then are adapted back into their home media, right?
Mhm.
And a great example of that is actually Aquaman. Aquaman had, of course, been a blonde guy. He got long hair and a beard at one point, but he's all been pretty mostly straight laced. After Momoa played him so successfully in the movie, they decided to give Aquaman full Polynesian tattoos that he just woke up with after having a trance. Which, thank you, by the way, Kelly Sudaconic. That's awesome. It's an amazing insult to anybody who knows anything about tattoo culture, but okay. God, sorry. I need a minute. I'm just
Well,
so
this is
angry about that.
so that's like the
Still-
latest.
I guess we
It's been
should
like
say
that's
that
just 2018. I don't know why I'm still angry about that. But
there are
that's
both
just,
good and bad examples of this,
Yeah,
because
well,
for some of we do have
personally, I don't-
examples.
personally, I don't mind the idea about Aquaman being tattooed. It was the way in which it happened, because like tattoos mean something. Damn it.
So are you saying that before they just like had to CGI them entirely out like they did with Superman's mustache?
Well, no.
In the comics.
Momoa has tattoos, and so he
Yeah.
always had tattoos.
That's
In
what
the
I-
comics, they added.
Oh,
in the
in the
comics, they
comics. I
added
thought you meant
comics.
in the second movie they did that.
The comics.
Yeah, no.
This is
In
the
the comics,
subject. This is the subject of our show: is things from the other
Right.
media that got put back
Right.
into the comics that became part of the original
Right.
character.
So
Okay,
Aquaman in the comics has a vision, and he wakes up covered in tattoos. And but the part of to explain my problem to people who may not know, but like Polynesian tattoos generally are there because they mean something. They're part of a story. Getting the tattoo is as much a part of the tattoo as the tattoo itself, right? So when you get an elaborate
I learned
tattoo
that from
job like
Momoa,
that,
from
it's
Moana.
it's days,
Yeah.
right, of sitting there and letting an artisan like cut into your skin, right? I mean, it takes time. And so for Aquaman to not choose to get tattoos and to just like wake up one day and, oh my goodness, I've got this super elaborate tattoo that I'll have until the artist gets sick of drawing it, is just like I mean, it's one of those things where like I wouldn't have minded that as a story element, especially the story where that story started.
If
because it
you
was really
don't like
promising.
it, don't buy my book.
Well, I don't. I quit. Actually, I quit when it was revealed that he ran
you
out
see
of
that
his pregnant
she-
girlfriend.
I think she
That's when I
backtracked on that a little bit. I think I saw something where she was like, they're not buying our books. I think she actually admitted it. It was funny.
I believe you're right. But anyway, but the point being, so that was part of my issue. But it wasn't the tattoos themselves. Aquaman can be covered in tattoos. That's perfectly fine. It would be befitting a character, a maritime character. But the reason they did it is because it was really popular because Jason Momoa is a beast, and his movie made $1 billion. So but the thing is, that's not new or unique to the whole project, right? Comic books have been adapting from their adaptations from like the beginning. And a great example of that is Kryptonite, which of course was invented as a plot device in the radio show and then was adapted into the comics because, hey, it's a great thing, right? A great little thing.
They got tired of like those radio programs were very much built on that kind of serialized, leave people at the edge of their seats. And they just couldn't. They were struggling to find ways to challenge Superman, who to that point was basically just, he wasn't that invincible actually in his first comic book rendition, as we all know.
Yep.
The first page,
shell.
Yeah, exactly. The first page of Action Comics is nothing short of a bursting shell could pierce his skin. But for all intents and purposes, that never happened. So he was practically invincible, and then only became more so as things went on. And so the radio show was like, all right, well, we need to amp the tension here. We need to find a way to threaten Superman. And so, there you go.
Yep. The radio show also introduced Jimmy Olsen. Yeah. And they introduced Jimmy Olsen in the radio show first.
To me.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to me because Jimmy seems like, let me back up a little bit. As an adult, Jimmy Olsen seems like such a natural and necessary part of the Superman mythos. I have a hard time understanding why he wasn't there from the beginning, because it's part of Superman's gregarious personality. It's part of his. It's a way for him to evince maturity. It's a way for him to evince affection for humankind, and it's a way for him to seem human, right? And himself. And so it seems obvious that would exist there. But man, when I first started reading comics, I couldn't understand why Jimmy Olsen was there. I was 11, 12 years old, and I'm just like, he's just so annoying. Why is he hanging out with Superman? I loved Batman and Robin. That seemed like a natural go-to because they had this father-son dynamic going, and it made sense to me. But Jimmy didn't look like Superman like a dad. He's like just this weird older brother kind of dynamic, but they weren't really kin. And it was one of those things where it's like, why is that kid there? He's too young to be working. Go back to school, kid.
I think part of the problem was they kept turning him into a monkey.
Well, I didn't. That was this was like 89, 90, so the monkey days were mostly past at that point.
But the point, the broader point, is the fact that things that have been fully accepted in the comic book canon, that people would imagine can't imagine the comics without, which is kind of what your point is there, Rhys, originated in other media. And that's not, and so part of our show today was to try to highlight some big examples of that.
Yeah.
Tankatron, we have a question from Tank in the chat.
Sure.
What would you say of the inverse effect like Deadpool? The writers of the comics made Deadpool more like Ryan Reynolds way before the movie due to them wanting him to be Deadpool in a movie.
Yeah, I remember that.
Was that after he was Deadpool in the Wolverine movie, though? Or is it before that?
I think it was even before that.
Okay.
Well, I mean, okay, so like they're, I guess they're there's sort of a line though, because like Deadpool started becoming like the R-rated version of Ambush Bug, like even before that. So the snarky quips and all that kind of stuff, those happened, even back when Ryan Reynolds did Waiting. So I don't know that wasn't already the trajectory on there. I think how much of that was just the ethos of the snappy, self-confident guy.
He was known for breaking the fourth wall in like the 90s, right? Like that's,
right.
Yeah, so that was.
Well, I know I can't remember
who
who
did that in the 80s.
Like his original appearance in Youngblood was nothing like we know him today.
No.
I can't remember who it was, but somebody revamped him at a certain point.
I can't remember who did it either, but that was
Well, except I know
can't
you
remember
had
if it was
Byrne with She-Hulk, and
Oh,
I think
come
that one predates Deadpool's fourth wall breaking.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, by a lot. By a lot.
So they, yeah, it's not like first.
And Ambush Bug, was it Geffen? Wrote Ambush Bug?
Yes, Giffen wrote Ambush Bug, yeah. And he was,
I mean,
and then you
Ambush
also have
Bug
the
was
fact that they stole Slade Wilson to be Wade Wilson. I mean, he was clearly created as a parody of this Deathstroke character. Deadpool is a parody of Deathstroke.
Yeah, I never thought about that.
Yeah,
Oh, really?
he was very, very. I mean,
I think
Liefeld-
I think Deadpool was a victim of because I think it's some of the early instances I've seen. I'm not an expert on this, but the instances I'd seen of some of his early fourth wall breaks, they weren't like, "Hey there, reader." It was just like nods. Essentially, it was like a little more subdued.
Mhm.
And then, but you get to the 2000s and meme culture starts to become a thing, and then it was like he just kind of like it was like
He's a character who is popular because no one takes him seriously.
well, he was like a cloth that like absorbed all the detritus of like internet
Well, and
culture
he
and just became the
Right.
expression of it.
Well, I mean, and the thing is, you can't. It's not. I don't think it's fair to say he was popular because of that. He was popular before, right? Like the
No, but I'm
idea
saying
that
the more, like even now, the more popular he becomes, the less you have to take him seriously, and the less people take him seriously, the more popular he becomes.
Nah, there's
Feeds
a
into
there's a-
his
think
own
that's definitely-
mythos, basically.
no, I think
know.
you're definitely onto something there with where we're with the death spiral we're in right now, the cultural death spiral we're in right now. But the Merc with the Mouth was the Merc with the Mouth before he was a joke, right?
Mhm.
And that's something that I think that it would be like a lot of people I don't think realize that that's the case because like he was popular they back in the 90s not at first but I mean he
I'm just saying that like at post as the 2000s go on and meme culture picks up, I think that
Mhm.
writers who wanted to be self-referential and also super ironic towards the material gravitated towards him.
yes
Because it was like I can make this whole thing kind of a mockery of itself, and Deadpool is the vehicle to do it with, and I think that just kind of amplifies it.
Right. Well, and I mean, and Deadpool's kind of a perfect, foil for that too, because like he was created in the midst of the giant pockets and the great shoulder pads and the enormous guns from the future, and
Right.
and so he's in the perfect storytelling geography to be a commentary on that geography. I mean, he's very much the same. He came to serve very quickly. While he was also like, at that time, he could be a little referential. I'm talking the late 90s, and at the same time be a genuine threat in combat, right? And so you could have him quipped with Wolverine. Wolverine never always takes himself seriously. Cable always takes himself seriously. And so you got to play off of these very serious, grim and gritty characters with somebody that was a fit in that world, but could step aside and be just like a little Bugs Bunny about it. But I do agree that the joke got greater than the frame of reference on that, if that makes any sense.
So
But yeah, so that being said, I don't know that any of the portrayals of Deadpool have bled into the comics. I think the comics kind of already headed that way. So, although the one in Tegatron's defense, my suspicion is that there was just that was largely a convergence of previously existing forces in the case of Deadpool. But one person I can definitely point to, because they specifically mentioned they were doing that, was the introduction of the Ultimate Nick Fury.
Wait,
Only be played by Sam Jackson.
There's a Deadpool example. There is a Deadpool example.
Oh.
Thank you, Tankatron, for bringing it up. Okay, so I know for a fact, and it's not actually Deadpool himself, but in the movie they use Teenage Negasonic Warhead.
Mhm.
And the original version of that character has nothing to do with what they made her in the film. But
Right.
after the film, I believe they basically kind of reboot that character to reflect, because again, the movie is so popular and that character was basically a throwaway. And so they're like, oh, we got something here. And I believe they retcon essentially that character. They recast her, reboot her to basically reflect her movie appearance. So that is an example of what we are talking about.
Well, there you
specifically
go.
From that film, yeah, the chick who's all kind of like kind of gothy and sort of like
Right. Yeah,
too
yeah.
cool for school.
Yeah, that very late British punk scene kind of chick.
Right. So like in the comics, I think she's like, I don't know if she's like green, like she's a creepy weirdo. Super. She looks very strange, and I think she might be. Usually, if it's too weird for the X-Men, it's usually an invention of Grant Morrison. I think it was one of those.
She is a Grant Morrison character.
I think she is. And then, like I said, after the films, they were like, "Nah, let's just make her kind of like she was in the movie." People like that. So that, yeah, like I said, that's exactly the example of something kind of like we're talking about.
But
where
he's trying to talk about the opposite, though, where the comics actually ended up causing something to happen in the movie.
Right, but I'm just saying that that it's funny that Deadpool being brought up because it actually has an example of what we're talking about, which is
here's something I should bring up about
film
Deadpool, actually,
directly influencing the comics, because
he's right about them. They mentioned multiple times in the comics Ryan Reynolds specifically. I remember one where he was actually trying to convince like a Hollywood producer to make a movie about him and to star Ryan Reynolds.
Well,
right?
Ryan Reynolds had been before Ryan Reynolds was cast as Deadpool in X-Men Origins Wolverine. He had been petitioning to play Deadpool in a film. So it's like Ryan Reynolds. I don't know if he still is or whatever, but back in the day he was a pretty big comic reader. And so he's in interviews has talked about that he was trying to get himself in that role, and then because he likes to talk and he thinks he'd be a good fit for it.
Yeah.
And so there may have been some parallel stuff on that.
So here's the deal, though.
Why did he get in a movie where they removed his mouth?
That's like
the ultimate screw you to him.
Right, that's the funny one of the funny bits is he finally lands the case to play Deadpool, and he's like, okay, I get to do it. So he gets to do the Slade Wilson Merc with a mouth thing in one scene, and then he comes back with no mouth, and he's just like, well, that wasn't what I signed up for.
Right.
So he didn't even read the script at all. He just said, Ryan Reynolds, would you like to play Deadpool? Yes. And when he later on read the script, and that was one of the elements and all that.
So actually, I have it pulled up. If just from our Wikipedia article, but you can briefly see, just so for visual aid's sake, this is kind of like her original appearance, and she's just like
for Negasonic Teenage Warhead.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Negasonic Teenage Warhead, and she's just like this kind of gothy vampire looking character, and then this is her appearance in contemporary Marvel comics, and it's basically just exactly the way she looks in the film. So that's so good call.
But here's the thing, right? I'm talking about this scene in the comics where he's trying to convince somebody to make a movie out of him, right? And if I remember correctly, he's got this, like, he has written the script himself, right? He's made a movie about himself here. Apparently, when they actually went to make the Deadpool movie, they had a rule they established when they were writing it. They said, if anything's going to happen, we're going to write this movie as if Deadpool were the director. And every decision they made had to be the question of, how would Deadpool do this if he was the one making this movie?
Okay.
Yeah.
So the reflection of what an actor looks like is something they have done for ages, to the point that I'm kind of surprised that Alfred was not changed to look like Michael Goff during the 89 Batman.
Well, I mean, I think part of that.
When I read him, I still hear his voice.
I think part of that is just because he's with Alfred, he has already had that look, right?
Right.
Once they settled on it, because the original Alfred look was a short, fat Hercule Poirot looking dude.
Right.
And then I can't remember the circumstances. They thinned him up for something, and then he stayed thin forever.
Was it Batman '89? Because that one was pretty iconic.
It was back in the 50s.
Oh, is it?
You know, he was
Like,
thin
in
in was it? Okay, I was gonna say he was thin in the Adam West show.
Yeah.
He didn't have a mustache, but
Yeah. It was he was fat like in the 40s for a little while, and then I think there was some story where he died, and then he showed back up again like it was nothing.
No, he showed up as the outsider.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, he was the outsider in the 60s, and then that's how they brought him back. I don't know how he became the outsider, but that's how he was.
That's right.
Yeah. And then, but I must say that the DC kind of settled on, they really had character model sheets and didn't deviate them a lot from much, after a while. But particularly with Superman, they seem to always want to reflect whatever the latest movie is. And that's too bad, because when John Byrne came back, he had what I would say is the definitive Ma and Pa Kent, and they should be left that way. And then all of a sudden they had the Superman and Lois show and so they kind of made them look a little more like them. They thinned up the hair on one, and it's like they made them look like the characters from that show in the 90s, and then they made them look like the parents, well, at least the younger, when we first got the baby type parents, look like the characters from Smallville.
Oh, like the Dukes.
Yeah, they look like it's what, Bo Duke?
Bo Duke, yeah.
Yeah, he looks like Bo Duke, and Ma looks like, it's like, I wish they would just leave it the one way, but they were already tampering with it. It's like every time they do a reboot, they have to redesign the characters. I wish they wouldn't. I wish they'd leave them alone.
Yeah.
But
onto the subject of the
if I could interject real fast, because it's something that had been brought up that I'm a little more knowledgeable about, specifically because I read a bunch of Ultimate Comics in my local library. It's kind of what I did in my youth to read comics. And what was interesting there is that there were examples of, almost a cycle of things where they started in the comics, then they would influence the films from the comics, but then they would kick back and influence the comics again. And so the Nick Fury being Sam L. Jackson is one of those examples, because they basically cast him as Sam L. Jackson in the comic before any of these films had been made. But the Ultimate line was a well that I think was purposefully made to essentially influence films. I know that from Ultimate Nightmare, which is their Ultimate Galactus storyline, lines like word for word were pulled in Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer. So they were.
It was a very mid movie.
Yeah, it had a spot on adaptation of Norrin Rad. Lawrence Fishburne, the perfect voice they gave, is just fantastic Silver Surfer. I completely agree on every other point.
Side note: am I the only person that think Lawrence Fishburne would also make an amazing Martian Manhunter?
Huh.
Yeah, no, he'd be good. Yeah,
probably too old at this point.
Well, yeah. At this
you
point.
do the voice if you were just. He's a.
But then again, I was fine with Charles Emerson Winchester playing Martian Manhunter, so I can be talked into anything.
So to wrap up the point, there is the fact that the film they cast essentially Brian Hitch, who's got a very photorealistic style, basically draws Samuel L. Jackson, casts him in the role, and then they just use that as the casting for the MCU. And then after the Ultimate Marvel goes away, they go, you know what? We love this rendition so much, we're going to take the mainstream Nick Fury and basically kind of retire him, and his son is going
never
to
been heard from before.
Who basically, again, is influenced by that.
Just happens to be black.
Right.
Because
for our audience, Nick Fury is.
I got to take it for a second back. There is actually zero reason to think that Nick Fury wouldn't have a black kid. Let's be completely honest.
But
Nick Fury kind of a
Explain
dog. There's no reason he wouldn't have a black
That's
dick.
fair. That's fair.
Are you
No,
saying he
so-
should have 8,000 kids?
Oh,
Well,
God.
I mean, at least like 12.
Okay.
So the point is that like is the fact that again
He's a real
going
busy
back to
guy,
our,
but he's also a real busy guy.
Okay.
he's also got a bunch of decoys. That can you know.
Wait,
going
maybe
out to-
that's how this works. Maybe he never actually changed races. There are just multiple Nick Furies.
It's just the black robot life on a decoy. No, but so what you end up seeing is like something that started in the comics, influenced the films. Like the seed was planted to be put into the
Right.
films, but then the films kick back and
Mhm.
then influence the mainstream comics. That's a really weird kind of circuitous route that particular example takes. But
Yeah,
it's-
I think that's a good one to point out. I also want to dip back into the distant past. We were talking about this in the back channels. One of the first that I can think of, very first, and most notable examples of the outside affecting the main house style. Superman in the Fleischer cartoons gained the ability to fly,
Yeah.
Right.
and before he just could leap great distances and all that jazz.
which episode does he fly? Because I know some of the early ones he's just doing the jumps.
Yeah. He's doing the jumps, but he stays up for so long that it's. I mean, that it just was. It was suddenly
Okay.
it
Is that
evolved
the-
into that.
that the-
Yeah.
But,
So
but
was this
Fleischer,
before or after they started animating that segment?
right? Fleischer had to draw him running up and crouching and then jumping, and he said that's so much more motion. If I could just have him fly, can he fly? And they said, yeah, he can fly.
Oh, this was in the full cartoons.
This was in the cartoons.
Oh,
He
okay.
at first did the jumps, and then he said, this is so much. There's so much panel work I have to do. So
Okay.
many steps
I was thinking about
involved.
when in the live action cartoon, or sorry, the live action show, just for flying, he would suddenly turn into an animation.
Oh yeah,
Right.
no, this is for the original Fleischer cartoons.
So lazy
That's like
animator is why
Superman.
Superman can fly. Okay, I got it.
Yes. Yeah,
And also they were able to. There were scenes in the Fleischer cartoons, and I haven't watched all of them in like a decade.
Mhm.
So I could give you a specific one, but where he's changing
Wait a minute.
direction in flight, right? And that's one
Yeah.
of those things too that it was done for ease.
Hold the phone.
it was
Could
done to
that
look
also
awesome.
be why he changes in a telephone booth? Because I remember, if you want to talk about a lazy animator, every time he would run into that telephone booth, all you'd have to see was a silhouette, which is a whole lot less for him to have to animate. What if
I
it
don't-
also meant like I'm not
I
going to have
don't-
him ripping
It's
open
certainly-
his suit and trying to do all this stuff? Let me just have him run into a back room and come out as Superman.
yeah.
It is
He
certainly
would be in the
possible,
back
but
room
I don't.
usually. Yeah.
I do not know where the origin of the changing the telephone.
That one might
booth.
be in the comics. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I do not know, but I do know that like I often, not often, but it's not infrequently in my life that I'll sit back and think about how like time and place and dated like that is. Like you can hardly even. I was
Right.
listening to there's a line that references the telephone booth bit in Pocket Full of Kryptonite.
Mhm.
And I was listening through to the Spin Doctors on YouTube the other day, and I was just sitting there and thinking, this song makes almost no sense to anybody who was born after 2004.
They need to do. I will say one thing that modern comics need to lean into more, and I don't think they do. Is that because superheroes are supposed to have dual identities, right?
Yes.
You need a changing room. You need a place to go from one identity to the other, and
Well, that's what the Batcave is for.
it's something. I mean, look, you got to be able to do that on the fly as well.
Mhm.
You need to be able to find a spot to quickly, don your outfit because you never know when the city will be under threat. You can't just go back to the Batcave and come back. The crime will already be in progress. And so that's the shorthand for the telephone booth. It was this convenient spot that you could have privacy and it's a nod to. It's a structural nod to this need for the dual identity to exist. And I think that modern creators need to lean into that a little bit more. And I think that there's a lot, it's something it's been occurring to me, and I think I might actually do it in a new Omega Girl story. But like the fact that we live in times where privacy is very precious and very difficult. Everyone's got a cell phone, privacy is not easy. And it's like sort of just like the struggle of that. And I think there's a modern society doesn't only give us problems. It gives us opportunities for superhero storytelling if we let it. And I think that, unfortunately, what they do instead is a lot of they seem to be doing a lot of this with superheroes where it's like, well, they don't have a super identity anymore. Just have them announce it to the public. So just have Spider-Man announce to the world that he's Spider-Man, have Superman announce to the world that have it be exposed and have him be okay with it. Have Iron Man announce to the world, just erase the dual identity, the secret identity.
Right.
So I don't know. It's just interesting.
And I would point out this is. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I talked about this a little while back, and how the problem with secret identities nowadays is that 3 million people in the same area all have the ability to put you on Facebook in 5 seconds.
Right.
You have satellites that can count the number of gravel rocks in your driveway. You've got every.
Yeah, but there's just as many ways. There's just as many ways for you to be inventive and creative and find ways around that. That's your
really. We have to suspend disbelief. We have to suspend disbelief because it bothered me when I was reading Identity Crisis and somebody was just calling Green Arrow Ollie in the middle of the street with people all around. I'm like, anybody could have a parabolic listening, thing, and somebody could just be leaning out their window and have one, because anybody can own one nowadays. And that's so they just kind of get clumsy about it because they don't worry about it. It's like nobody's gonna. Yes, you could, but we're just gonna suspend our disbelief. And really, the phone booth thing has
I'm not
been
ready for that,
problem
Rhys.
so long
you
ago.
ready for that yet?
No.
What?
I was just telling him I'm not ready for that yet.
Even in 77, 78, they were making a joke about how phone booths are now little tiny stalls that you can't get in one.
Right.
That they made that joke in the movie. But another thing, by the way, the transition, Wonder Woman spinning and just changing into her thing after a little flash, that was something they came up with for the TV show, and they have been incorporating that into the
Lois and Clark
universe here and there. And
of course, a lot of superheroes just learn to have their costumes right under their clothes early on. That makes it the fastest ability to just.
Well, they're basically pajamas. Underclothes anyway. So.
Right.
Yeah.
That's actually one of the funny things. Like on one of the Discord servers I'm on, somebody shared this scene from a Batman Adventures of Barbara Gordon changing clothes in a dressing room at a department store there. But the thing is like the funniest thing about this scene is it's like down there and she's struggling to put it on really quick, 48 seconds, right? But it's like that's a lot of dressing to be done in 48 seconds. I don't know that I actually believe this.
That's right.
He's very practiced at it.
In real life, in the spy game, quick change is actually a thing that people work very hard to train.
People do it, but I'm saying like getting a Lycra suit on is not an easy thing when she could just be wearing it underneath her blouse and no one would even think twice about it.
I wear pressure socks and they take enough struggle to put on that doing an entire costume like that would take a while.
In fairness, Hutch, Barbara is supposed to be a little younger than you and I.
Oh, I know she may be younger and all that. I'm just saying, it's these things are not easy to do.
So this is actually a really good segue because one of the other characters that was created in other media or things that were created in other media and then imported into the comics was Barbara Gordon herself, who was created as Commissioner Gordon's daughter for Batman 66, the TV series. And then
I'd always wondered about that.
It was almost because there was another Batgirl and Batwoman from the 50s.
Right.
Whoever it was at CBS or whoever created Barbara Gordon as a character, and then she was instantly popular and plugged right into the TV series. I mean, the comics very shortly after.
I believe they coordinated it with DC to have her come out before the character.
Oh, really?
But it was pushed by the TV shows that we're going to do Batgirl, and then they let the TV show. I mean, they let the comics debut her
Okay.
before the show. So it's like this is the character from the comic books.
Okay.
And,
Okay.
Yeah.
See that
Notice
part I
that-
did not know. I knew that it was created by the writers' room there at CBS or whoever
And
put it
that is
together.
true. Yeah.
But I did
So
not know.
If we're
and
going to
the
talk,
crazy, one of the crazy things about that too, and this is something that maybe I'm wrong about. I had because we had always seen Commissioner Gordon being an older man with like gray hair or balding or whatever previously,
Right.
and it was in the follow-up series. There was an animated series that was a follow-up series to the cartoon serial that ran in the early to mid 70s, where Commissioner Gordon is shown being a redhead. And I had always assumed that, and then after that, it's retconned that he'd always been red haired, but we saw him after his hair grayed in the comics. So we saw flashbacks of young Jim Gordon on the beat. He's Carrot Top, right?
Yep.
So my thought had always been that had been retconned because you have
Right.
Barbara Gordon with the red wig in the TV show, and then when that made the comic, she was a natural ginger in the comic. So of course, her dad would have been a ginger in his youth, and of course, not necessarily her natural dad. That's a whole different story to go in there. But knowing that she was introduced in the comics, she was invented by the TV show, introduced in the comics. That makes me wonder that when the cartoon series came up, are they taking notes from the comics or are they taking notes from the TV show about Jim Gordon being a ginger? I don't know the answer to that question.
Also, I thought it was the black hair that was the wig in the show. Am I wrong?
No. Yes.
I don't know.
Could have sworn.
Jim Tuner has appeared in the chat to give the most fire Batgirl take I have seen all night. Betty Kane is the only Batgirl. Barbara Gordon lives on Earth 5 or something.
I mean,
I will say that Betty Kane got a kind of the crap end of the stick in later stories. I don't think she's been treated really well since then. And I honestly, side note, does anybody else besides me just really hate the Kathy Kane Batwoman character?
Yep.
Is that just I really cannot stand that character, and I don't know if it's just because
you mean the Golden Age Kathy Kane or the modern Kane?
The modern Kathy Kane. Yeah. The modern Kathy Kane. The Golden Age Kathy Kane. I don't know
how the same writer can write her so horribly and write Batgirl stories so amazingly. I don't get it at all.
I don't know. I just find the Kathy Kane character to be really grating and irritating, and it's sort of like
I just don't see any need for her. The Bat family is too big. The Bat family is way too big.
Right. Well, and not just the Bat family. Like the in order to give it
Spider-Verse. I hate it.
Right? They say, okay, so she's Bruce's first cousin on his mother's side, but Bruce was still raised by himself with no one. I mean, you don't the whole Batman story doesn't make sense if he's got kin that live on the other side of the hill.
Right.
Right? It doesn't.
Quite frankly, I've been thinking about
this.
Oh
no, Thomas really hated her.
Yeah, I've always thought that it's really rather unbelievable that the butler raised him. It's like don't these guys have wills? Neither Bruce's parents nor Dick Grayson's parents have wills saying, here's the Godfather who takes over if we die. And you'd think that billionaires would have somebody lined up.
Like a whole trust situation?
Yeah.
You're right, but I still love Alfred as the Godfather, though.
Yeah, quite frankly, it's a
I wish they'd do more to actually have
because he doesn't get Bruce therapy. He's not a good father.
What are you talking?
So here's the part of the situation with all of that would be really easy to rectify if you were writing it. You could say, well, yeah, but he didn't get Bruce therapy. No. See, this is the thing. Like, Bruce goes to therapy, and the therapist is like, man, you seem really well adjusted. And he's like, life is tragic and everything's bad, and it's okay though. I push on, and he just says Bruce is so smart. He says all the right things, and the therapist is like, well, I think you're doing okay. here's my little note. I don't think I need to see you next week. And that's the end of the story. Because smart people can get away with anything.
That makes him a psychopath, quite frankly. A sociopath.
Yes. Well, not necessarily. Manipulation, you don't have to be a psychopath to be manipulative. It helps, but you don't have to.
Yeah, but he isn't planning to be a criminal yet. I mean, Batman always planned to be like a cop or a detective or FBI or something like that.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying that if you don't want to, there's when it comes to situations like that, there are two ways to get out of somebody prying into your business. One is to try to muscle your way out of it and not answer questions. And when a 10-year-old doesn't answer questions, it makes him seem like he's being evasive and hiding something.
Right.
But when a 10-year-old tells you what you think you want to hear, you don't question it. And so if you're smart enough and you want people prying into your business, you just tell people what they want to hear.
See,
so back to if I can, we need to steer things back towards the topic here eventually.
Yes, we do. We do. This is the problem. See, listen, people. This is the problem with coming with a topic 10 hours before you do a show.
So, okay, but since
I
want to take advantage of the fact that we have a Bruce Timm art piece on screen to talk about one of the biggest recent examples, at least, of the principle we're discussing at play, which is the fact that the animated series of Batman, which I'm currently rewatching right now, has it's on Amazon Prime if you got it. It's
yeah, I don't like to pay for watching things.
Oh, okay. I do want to get physical copies at a certain point, just because I want physical media. But okay, so Bruce Timm and Paul Dini they did some work on the Batman mythos, and so a chunk of what young people of my generation, and I think it even won over people of I don't want to speak for you, Hutch, but I think that some of Paul Dini and Bruce Timm's takes on some characters that had been kind of either blasé, passé, or whatever, I think it won over older fans too. For example, Mr. Freeze had kind of just been a goofy cornball. No one gives a crap about him. And then Paul Dini, Bruce Timm come around, and they kind of cement this is who Mr. Freeze is. And people liked him a lot and went, we're going to go with this take.
Well, and to be more specific, Mr. Freeze was always like there were two versions of Mr. Freeze. One was the goofy, corny Mr. Freeze, and then there was the terrifying, super villain, heartless, Mr. Freeze. And so there would be the Mr. Freeze that would kill a family and laugh about it, or there was the I'm gonna forget his name. Well, the goofy Mr. Freeze from the 60s TV show where everything is a pun and they're the
Well, I was gonna say even in the 60s TV show, I remember 3 separate actors with 3 entirely different looks. Every time he was on screen, they completely reinvented him.
Yep. George Sanders, the voice of Shere Khan from Jungle Book, was, I believe, the first one. And the portrayal in the animated series with Michael Ansara was just amazing. And oddly enough, Chuck Dixon had killed off Mr. Freeze, who hadn't been seen in years. And when he shows up, he's still in his superpowers, the bad superpowers outfit.
Costume. Yeah.
That bad, I don't know what you call it, the exoskeleton type thing. He shows up and Joker shoots him and says, dump him in the river. And they did that just about the time that the animated series made him cool. And so very shortly...
it was about a year before that. That would have been 90. It would have been 91.
Yeah, because this was during the Robin 2 or Robin 3?
Robin 2.
Robin 2,
Joker.
okay.
Yeah.
And then during the Underworld Unleashed, they had him come back to life and get a new look that's kind of a frightening skeleton, a frightening skull inside a big dome. And this was because the animated series had made him cool and gave him a good origin. He'd never had a dead wife thing.
I was going to ask if about his origin.
No, he had nothing. He was just some sort of scientist who developed a freeze ray or stole it or something and used it to. Yeah. And then something went wrong and he was stuck in his suit. But he was basically just out there to steal stuff. I mean, there was nothing more than that. It was a gag of the week villain.
Right.
So Paul Dini comes around and Bruce Timm, and they basically make the character that people really like today for him, and that's not the only example. I want to say one last thing about the deal, though. One of the reasons that they made him so beloved and such a powerful character was that they gave him this tragic backstory and made him relatable. Mm-hmm.
But it was wildly popular and everyone loved it. But now we can't have a villain that isn't relatable and lovable, and that's a problem, people. If you're telling stories about good and evil,
that's a fair point. That's a fair criticism.
I think Disney has finally got us to the point where we're sick of it.
Yeah. Well, the part of the thing is it doesn't take anything away from Mr. Freeze, because in this case it's really good, but people got to use that as a crutch, and that's a problem.
But it's definitely an example of like a show that really kind of revamps and says, hey, you know, this is establishing kind of who this character is going to be for future audiences. And this is not, like I said, the first time that Batman the Animated Series did it. I think Batman the Animated Series like kind of became well known for having several examples of these types of redesign revamps that they did to characters. I don't think I know them all. Mr. Freeze is obviously a very important one. The second one that we obviously have to talk about is not a revamp, but a complete new edition. Everybody's favorite / not favorite at all. Anti-villain Harley Quinn, meant to be the Joker's Maul. Everything, may I say, meant to be the most tragic story they had ever written.
Well, so first of all, about that, I want to take a little time to talk about this. First of all, it was fairly common from the 60s on for the Joker to have a maul. That was a standard bit within the 66 series. It got put into the comics every once and again because the Joker always had this dual affectation of the clown and the mobster in his design style. And so that was a common thing. And Harley Quinn specifically was invented because while it was not acceptable from 3 to 5 to show you killing people, you could show spousal abuse, and that was okay. That would get past the censors. So they need to find some way to describe that the Joker was really evil, and so they couldn't friggin' kill people. They just had a man beat up a psychotic woman repeatedly on air. So I'm not sure that says good things about our society. But there you have it.
So Harley Quinn comes along, and again, Dini and Bruce Timm come along, and they really are the two of them are a storytelling powerhouse in my opinion. I'm not saying that everything they make is perfect. I'm just saying that they definitely made a big impact and a lot of good content. And so Harley Quinn, and to make an addition to the Joker's mythos, and to make such a good one. Yeah. Oh, gosh. Okay. Yeah. Let's give a second. Let that one percolate.
Sorry.
It's fair. It's fair.
But
to make such a
that's such a spot on comment on the whole Harley Quinn thing. I got it. Oh my god.
But I just want to say that it really is an accomplishment to make such a lasting. And Harley Quinn is one of the last breakout superhero universe characters that we've had in recent memory. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of them. A lot of them are basically characters that we inherited, and Harley Quinn is one of the most recent, most enduring ones that we've gotten so far, like her or hate her.
Yeah.
Personally, I really like her classic rendition, which actually pulls from the Harley Quinn-ade, really actually makes her look like a Harley Quinn, and really channels that idea of like evil clowns,
right.
and sinister clown kind of ideas, and there's a lot you can play with there with the whole either the Harley Quinn-ade or the Punch and Judy idea, and that there's the spousal abuse right there, kind of inculcated in that whole concept, and so it functions on multiple levels there when you're making some of those nods, and
the problem is that she is great as a person who is pushed around by the Joker, and she is more verbally abused than physically abused by the Joker. But I mean, he's when she realizes that he made no plans for her to not be with the Nuke when she's in the last canonical animated thing was the Justice League appearance, where she realizes that, yeah, the Joker's getting out of Las Vegas, but the Nuke is going off, and he made no plans, just left her behind. And it's he pretends to be affectionate towards her, but it's just his way of manipulating her. And this, I think it's great, except that there's people who are like, well, you can't have, that's terrible, because that's bad. She's a woman and we should have a better representation of women. It's like, she's a villain. It's like, I don't understand why you can't have villains who smoke and drink, and it's like, we're not holding these people up as the good guys.
Well, I don't see why I can't have heroes who smoke and drink.
Right.
But
there you go.
Sorry. Anyway, but back to the
like,
topic.
the Penguin can't have a cigarette in the holder, and it's like,
right.
What
right.
are we imitating him? Like he's a role model? None of these are role models.
So I wanted to bring up like the things that I liked about Harley Quinn before I started bringing up the things I hate.
Go ahead.
Her original rendition I think it fits perfectly in with the Joker's aesthetic. I think it's a nice twist and it's a good addition. Is it Tara Strong who voices her? Who voices her?
I can't remember.
No,
You'd
it's
have been
Arlene
young
Sorkin.
if that was the case.
Okay, sorry.
Oh yeah, that's right, Sorkin.
Yeah,
but
the overact,
even the Jersey accent.
The sort of overacted voice that's kind of put on, Mr. J. Like it all works. It works very, very well. I think is it New 52 that breaks her? I think it's New 52 that just started to just like crack that character, and they were like,
it was before that though. I mean, even in her pre-52 series, you had her like rejecting the relationship with the Joker, and like
I'm not talking about
that.
I'm talking about the fact that they took her character from being a Harlequin-ade nod, this sort of like nod to clown culture, and they basically just made her into Chick from Hot Topic. And
yeah,
I think
the new. I think that's
two is where they basically they debuted. The redesign. I know for a fact. I'm pretty certain it was the New 52 that did the redesign. Where like we're gonna put her in the Hot Topic outfit, the trashy shorts, and she started like being a harlot, because it was like New 52. She was jumping men and really gross.
Well, yeah, well, I mean, and the thing is like they had hinted around even before the New 52 about that weird Harley Ivy thing, which there's a whole thing we could talk about that would probably get my channel shut down. But one of the things about that though is what I was getting at is, even though you see the hot topification of her outfit, there's two things to be said about that. But one of the things is the core of her character. I don't think you can have Harley Quinn grow past all the Joker stuff and have her be a compelling character is still in the life, right? Sean Gordon Murphy did a really good job with Harley Quinn in White Knight, but the way he did it was by having her post supervillain stuff, right? And it was one of those things where like she's left that part of her life behind. And it makes it the whole deal with the Joker extra tragic in that story. But that was compelling in there. But I don't think she could be compelling and not be there to be, a foil for the Joker's evil. Outside of that, and that's not something people want to deal with. But I don't think you can have. I don't think the character works outside of those confines.
Here's the thing. I'm not so sure that she was ever even supposed to be more than a single appearance character. This right here,
I disagree with that. Bruce Timm was so in love with her.
Well, yeah.
Maybe he got in love with her afterward, but
Bruce Timm has very unhealthy ideas about his.
I'm putting up an image here. Right, this I'm pretty sure is from her very first appearance. It's the end of the episode where she is lying in a dumpster after he has completely abandoned her and thrown her out a window in return for her services, right? And she's beating herself up, saying it's like, thinking she disappointed him and it's all her fault. No, Harley. There is no joke to get.
I don't think that's her first appearance.
He abused you and threw you out with the trash. this is supposed to be a tragic story of a very messed up and tragic character. There's only
Sure,
yeah.
I'm just saying if you go by production order, I don't think this is her first appearance. She shows up again as just a mall character. Because like the way the production order of the episodes and the airing date of them aren't the same.
Well, maybe.
So they made
Fox
episodes.
was really,
I think
Fox was really bad about putting things in the wrong order. Firefly.
When you're doing that kind of story, there's kind of only so much you can do with that character. And if you keep pumping them out over years and years and years, you're either going to have to change them or you're just going to create the most bland character ever made. And either one of those outcomes is probably the worst outcome possible.
I think Jim may have just changed my mind again. Says that she could work again if her and the Joker were foils for each other, if the relationship was bad in both directions. So you're looking at like the inverse of the Arthur Mara dynamic.
See, I think she works as an abused person, as an example of the woman who's injured and always makes excuses and always goes back to him. And even if they have a big breakup and she says, I'm going out on my own, she could always fall back into being with him again because he's changed. It's just, I have a feeling she didn't have a good relationship with her dad.
Yeah. So, and I think one of the things that Jim's pointing out is like, if it was more like the thing is the stakes, depends on the way the story's written. But his little pitch down there has got honeymooners vibes all over it. Yeah. And that could work really, really well in the right hands. I think the problem comes to, and you've talked about this. I think Twitless, and I think that Josh, the cartoon guy, has as well, is the idea about the stakes in a Joker story. Are we dealing with mass murder Joker, or are we dealing with the zany, the clown prince of crime Joker? And
problem is, I used to think those two were different characters, and
well, now there's 3 different characters. So
my point is, no matter what they say, there's really they're all the same at this point, and that's what I hate about the Joker.
Well, the thing is, they're not. You almost never see the clown prince of crime in anything anymore. The last time I think he was ever done in anything was.
Well, in his first appearance, was he a little bit of both? He was a little bit of both. He was like, I'm pretty sure it's a murder.
He was a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and like in White Knight, Batman White Knight, you really saw kind of both. But the biggest thing about it is that the capers, the Joker's capers, it was the clown prince of crime, but he didn't care about the body count. He wasn't out there trying to kill people. He just didn't care about the body count. And that was kind of the way to ride the line between those things. And I mean, and actually Jack Nicholson's portrayal in Batman 89 is pretty close to riding the line too.
That's a good portrayal. It's a good one.
Yeah. Oh, it is definitely.
It's top tier.
But like I think if you had a situation where you were dealing with something like that, where I think you could have a honeymooners kind of dynamic with it.
Well, if I could add a little bit too, because just again, for people who aren't as familiar, some audience members who may not be quite as familiar with the character, she starts off being introduced in the and thank you, Cartoonicus, for giving us this image, because it's even in this tragic moment, her kind of melodramatic side is being displayed. And this is a very brilliant addition to the Batman mythos. And in the animated series, they played it off in a very she could be kind of funny. She was definitely meant to be an exaggerated character, but she was also meant to be there was a tragic side to it. And that's kind of what Rhys was alluding to. They did that with a lot of the Batman animated series villains. They gave a lot of them kind of tragic backstories. And this for better or worse, this added a lot of dimension to a lot of these characters and made a lot of them fan favorites. The flip side of this is that as this character started to make a transition into comics, I know that at least by the time we hit the New 52, they had taken this character and the way she's designed and everything, and they had basically kind of the generous way to put it is they took her in a different direction. I think they degraded the character. I think they degraded her visually. I think they degraded her in the way they decided to portray her as a sort of sex liberated feminist, I guess, is probably the way
did
you
exactly
should put
what
it.
I said. They tried to, they figured out she'd be boring if you just kept doing the same thing. So they figured, let's try to have her get saved from herself, right? And then we're gonna have her, turn her into a instead of a tragic character into a victorious character. And
Right, and the way they chose
modern day,
right, the way they chose to do that was through sex liberation, and so
Right.
she became essentially a hoe, for want of a better word. And in the New 52, it started off with her just like, I think, just jumping on dudes, and then by the time we get to the contemporary modern period and the show that she's in, she's this polyamorous. I don't know how many of the rainbow flag colors does she represent now?
Well, at least I don't know. At least 3, 4, 6.
Right.
I don't know.
So and that's essential. And again, that's another reason why unfortunately, that's another reason how that character has been kind of co-opted. She's become a representative, and that they've also started to put that. I don't know if it's the new renditions of her and how they color her hair. They're starting to color her outfit and her hair. She used to be.
They added blue to her color.
She used to be.
Well, and I mean, and part of the well, this is one thing I want to talk about earlier. Is part of the hot topic look that went with all of that. One of the aspects to it was that I can't remember the first story arc in the New 52 when she went to New York, left Gotham for New York. Well, she joined a roller derby league, and so her whole look was roller derby for a little while. And that was kind of the move along that. Well, roller derby has its own set of cultural expectations and visual cues and ties into a lot of the performance aspect on too, but it definitely leaves all of the classical theater, folk theater aspects of the character behind entirely.
I would also say roller derby also codes pretty hard into queer culture.
Yes, it does. Yes, well, of course it does, because it's even outside of the overt queer aspect of it too. You still have females doing stereotypically male things,
right?
And of course, if you're a dude playing roller derby, you need to reevaluate your life.
Ouch.
The point is that if you look at the character on screen, it's what we're describing. Actually, can we? I'll pull up a modern Harley Quinn look, because you could just see just like what they've done to the character, just even in her recent film portrayal.
Yeah. But in her new series, she's like, she knows who Bruce Wayne is. She's like living in the Wayne mansion being taught by Alfred, and it's like they've just completely gotten away from what was fun about
if
her.
you just look at her whole like visual portrayal, there's one major difference you'll notice, and that is the original her was basically yeah. I mean, obviously the original her was just another superhero, supervillain costumed character, right? Now, I personally, anybody who knows me knows I do not like superhero costumes, so I appreciate anytime they can kind of try to revamp something into looking like realistic clothing. But that leaves basically only her voice and personality for you to tell who she is. And that voice and personality was basically New Yorker, right?
It was Jersey.
Jersey, Yonkers.
What I'm saying is now it's not just New Yorker, it's underground. It's gangster, right? Out on
that's not gangster again. That's just Hot Topic pretend. Like that's not. The gangsters don't.
Nevertheless, that's been her style.
It's more. I think you're conflating like juggalos with gangsters, and they're not the same thing.
Yeah.
So
very different concepts. Even gangsta is not this. This is.
It's urban. It is urban, but it's like trailer park urban, not like inner city urban.
There is no serious
gay, or does that just mean that the people creating this are like doing the greetings fellow kids version of trying to design a character?
I think there's something to do with that. I don't think anybody who did the redesign it actually listens to ICP. So
the point I want to make, the broader point here is that this is a character that came from television, impacted and imprinted itself on the comic book consciousness, and then, in my opinion, this is a kind of a bittersweet example. Whereas Mr. Freeze, like, I think really turned out a winner. and we've gotten a very good, pretty good rendition. I think they've unfortunately in some very contemporary comics have tried to trash Mr. Freeze a few times, but like he can recover. He's still, I think, got a really good legacy and a very good redesign. Harley Quinn, unfortunately, went from being an excellent addition to the Batman mythos and a very good aesthetic to being, I don't know. I don't know if you can recover that character. I think we're doomed to the hot topic girl.
Well, see, well, and the problem comes. I think there's a couple of problems with that. One is that with the right writer, I think you can be, and I think a great example of that is what Sean Gordon Murphy did with the character in White Knight. I was absolutely disinterested in that project when I heard the Joker was involved in it. I thought, there will never be another meaningful Joker story. They're all done. It's over. We need to just kill the character and move on. And then I read somebody, I think actually, I can't remember who it was. Somebody like bribed me into reading the first issue.
I was going to say that would be tough sell.
I can't remember the exact nature it was, but somebody was just like, no, give the first issue a try. Give the first issue a try. Maybe even brought it to my house and dropped it off. I can't remember for sure. But I read the first issue and I was just like something about the way that he hit those notes. I was like, I gotta find out what happens next. And he told a compelling Joker story and a compelling Harley Quinn story. And he actually brought these characters back to their cores and spun them out from there in ways that were tragic and dramatic and believable. Great story. Second volume, not a fan, but that first volume was perfect.
Did he redesign? Like, what was the design on Harley Quinn though? Because, like I said, just the aesthetic of her has just been so co-opted.
Did she ever even wear a costume?
Right. Well, this is part of the thing is like the Harley was predominantly a post super, like a post life Harley Quinn, right? So she was Harleen Quinzel who had this past and was there's a whole thing. So like that was it. So it wasn't it was a whole different kind of a thing. It was like the end of the animated series and then projected forward 5 years through Murphy's own like artistic vision, right? Mm-hmm. So it built a lot on the same kind of content of stuff, but
I will say, if the subject is can she be salvaged, all Batman villains have kind of gone astray or gotten overused or badly used, and you leave them aside for a little bit and then they reappear and somebody has a new take on them. You could easily, as I said, you can have her go back to Joker anytime and just, because that's how damaged she is. That's all you'd have to do.
You can, but like I'm saying, I feel like then you're just telling the exact same story.
No, I'm not saying that you have to do that. I'm just saying you can always salvage a character because, like, the Penguin has gone through some pretty bad periods. And if we're talking about adaptation, the animated series had to have that stupid, the claw thing, in the first like season or two, and then they just said and they didn't like it and they got away from it. And they go through different Penguins from time to time.
Don't get me wrong.
One thing I need to add though, Hutch, you brought up a very interesting point, which is if they put her on a shelf and then revisited her, they could do that. Mm-hmm. I would counter that by saying that
she's too popular to do that.
That because of the market attention and because she's this like
yes queen,
this sort of like feminist, but it's this. If Wonder Woman was like first and second wave feminism, you definitely have like fourth or fifth with this character, and they're making television shows with her right now. I'm like, I just don't see them putting her down. Right. So go ahead, Cartoon. Guess it.
Well, just pointing out that I think I can see Jim Turner's point in that, like, a new way to reinvent them would be to, what he's saying, basically make them this power couple who hate each other and they're always equally, in power. But I don't think you can go back to the early days of just doing the old she's a victim again, because there's only so much you can tell with that story, and that's why I would be really surprised if she was in fact meant to show up more than one time.
See, and that comes back to one of Denny's rules. That is, Joker gets pulled out off the shelf no more than once a year, right?
Yeah.
Ideally not but every 5 years. You tell a big story, every several years with the Joker, and that's it. It would be the same thing where if you had the status quo with Joker and Harley being, this thing, she doesn't have a monthly title. You don't have all that kind of thing. But the thing is, they don't care about artistic integrity. They care about them dollar bills.
Yeah.
And I think that's the issue that comes with it. It's the same thing, like, interestingly, so we're talking to Fizz brings up the Riddler was treated as a joke and the villain in the 80s. The Riddler was always a joke villain in terms of, like, he had a gimmick, right?
Mhm.
And so the question about how serious he was as a person, it was all about the puzzles and the gimmicks. So even if he was a serious villain who was, like, up to doing danger to people, that was secondary to the puzzling aspect of things. But then you get to I think it's a Dark Knight, Dark City, when the Riddler becomes possessed by Barbathos, the bat demon of the ancient,
Right.
blah, 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 and starts killing people. And Riddler hasn't. There's been a few stories where he wasn't, but by and large hasn't been a not outright murdering villain since then. And, like, in one of the worst portrayals of the Riddler ever, I think, was really, and it started out so good, was that Gotham TV show.
I knew
Right?
you were going to say it.
Oh.
Yeah.
In the first half of the first season was amazing. The Riddler was amazing, and then all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, now he's a serial killer," and I just like,
So
you're killing me,
this is
Small.
something I have noticed about Batman writers in general. They always seem to want to push to the absolute hardest core. So everybody becomes a senseless murderer.
Well, and it
Everybody.
didn't used to be that way. It wasn't that way when I was first coming
Oh,
up.
yeah.
It wasn't that way until when it actually happened. In terms of my thing, when it started happening in my experience was when I stopped reading Batman on the regular and I was branching into other part of the DC universe, and then I came back and it's like, oh my God, they're all murderers. What the hell happened? I go read JSA for several years, and then I come back and everyone's trying to kill Batman.
Oddly enough, the only character on that Gotham TV show who wasn't a psycho was Mr. Zaz, who is a psycho. It's like he's a he counts every murder he does with a little tick count on his body, and it's like they made him like a paid contract killer instead of an obsessed murdering psychopath. And it's like, but everybody else
a contract killer.
Yeah,
I think that even a contract killer can work in really well with that too. But I mean, it was one of those things where
I'm just saying he's normal. You talk to him, he's fine. He's normal. He's not. He doesn't have If you would have to know what he's like in the books.
Josh should be the kind of guy who you can tell that he's looking at you, thinking of all the ways to kill you.
Yes,
right. He should always be super scary. He should have that same kind of energy that the Corinthian has in Sandman, where he's like where he's always, everyone he sees, he's sizing up, right?
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I think you could do a story where Zsasz as a person is like kind of a Dexter arc, where he's using his psychosis as a money-making machine.
I understand that. I'm just pointing out that he's the only person on this Gotham show who isn't. Everybody else is portrayed the way Mr. Zsasz should be portrayed, and he's not portrayed that way.
Even Jim Gordon in season 2 is a friggin' psychopath in that show.
His ex-wife is a psychopath.
It could have been so good, and it started out so good.
They want to portray Gotham as this dark, gritty, messed up place, and
here's the thing.
They'll never get away from it.
Here's the thing: is Gotham can be dark and gritty. It stops actually being dark and gritty when everyone's crazy, right? You go back and watch like Double Indemnity, right? Like Fred McMurray is terrifying because he's the normal one, right? He's decided I want that chick and I'll kill her husband for it because I want to hit it. That's the thing, is he's a normal, reasonable person who decides that sex and money are worth killing somebody over, and he walks across that line knowing what he's doing. That's terrifying. That's grim. That's gritty. It's not crazy. The minute you start making everybody crazy, it stops being grim. It stops being gritty. It stops being realistic, because the real monster is in here, and we all know it. And that's the thing, is when you make the crazy hides up the fact that we're all. Here's part of my big theory why craziness is so trendy, is because when we lean on that, we get to ignore the fact that we're evil. Like that evilness, that darkness is inside of our own hearts. And so we get to say, oh no, I'm a victim of my circumstance. I've got a broken brain. I'm neurodivergent, whatever it is. Not, no, you are a sack of crap who is seeking your own best interest over the interest of your fellow man. And that's the issue. And so we get to play act, and we get to have this pretend in our fiction. We get to have this pretend vision of what madness looks like, because it's a mask that we can wear to hide from our moral responsibilities. And that's one of the reasons I can't stand that everyone's crazy kind of thing, because yes, everybody is mentally unwell in one way or another, but that's because we're living with the consequences of our own corrupt souls.
And this is
not the other way around.
This is kind of tying into what I've been talking about with Harley being overused, though, and I'm going to put this back up again. This is the problem with Batman having a no-kill rule. You end up with these characters who 80 years later have been in 40,000 stories, and all they do is slaughter people over and over and over. And Batman is apparently absolutely worthless as a hero in Gotham, because Gotham has not changed one iota.
Well, this is why Denny had that rule, or started that rule about the Joker, is that after he beat Robin's head in, and they had that story, you did not see him for a year and a half, something like that. And
that was a long time.
And the problem is that you then have the killing joke, you have the death in the family, and it's like, and then he's like threatening to kill a baby, and he kills Jim Gordon's new wife, and it's like, what can you? It's like, why is that? You can't have this guy. He's pushed it too far, right. And it's like, you can't go back to I'm going to have the fish are smiling when they're upside down. It's like, you can't go back to that when you've gone to so far overboard with all that stuff.
And correct me if I'm wrong on here, Hutch, but wasn't Chuck's the Joker's Wild the first canon Joker story since the death of Jason Todd?
No, he had been he'd been in the Birds of Prey, threatening to nuke New York, and that's what got him into the prison. The Joker,
but the Robin 2, the Joker's Wild was before the Birds of Prey was a series.
Right. I'm sorry. Yeah, so you're saying that was his first appearance since the Joker's Wild.
Yeah, but
the Birds of Prey, it was like there, and then Birds of Prey. I think maybe, I don't know, as far as you know, can I say canonically he never appeared anywhere else?
It was, but I remember. I guess the reason I'm trying to remember is there was an interview that Chuck was given one time, and he was talking about that, like when he pitched the Robin 2 miniseries, he didn't think he'd get to use Joker for it. So he was just like, because then he had the no Joker rule. I mean, and Joker was on the shelf. So
Joker was one of the 5 big villains in Underworld Unleashed. I don't know where that is in the.
Yeah, that was after.
Yeah, that was after. So that was definitely after that. I mean, he appears here and there in DCU. At large, he's in the Justice League's Injustice League, the big Grant Morrison thing. You know, where where he gets shot and it turns out to be Plastic Man, and Martian Manhunter makes him sane for a few minutes, which is a great story. But here and there he appears, but as far as in the Batman comics, he was really trying to not have him appear much at all. And then it's because he had done so much stuff. The next time he appears is in Birds of Prey, and he's threatening to nuke all of New York. And they're like, guess what? You don't go back to the sanitarium when you try to do that. You are now a federal criminal, and they move him to the slab.
Well, and I think that actually comes to one of the elements, and from our chat, Fizz says New 52 was when all Batman's villains became psycho murderers. I actually think it started before that, And I think that the movement toward that was probably in conjunction with Grant Morrison's Arkham Asylum book.
Yeah.
Where we started taking, Killer Croc from being, a mobster with a bad case of psoriasis to being a monster. And
I've lamented the battle for the cowl when Bruce Wayne died, and how Robin, the new Robin, Damian, like, is riding around with some chick he picked up in the Batmobile.
Oh,
and,
you have to
and
remind me
Oracle,
of this.
or what's that?
You're gonna remind me of this.
Sorry, Oracle ejects her, and then Killer Croc like eats her. It shows up with her severed foot and says, "Thanks for the snack." And then later, Two-Face is like,
I was gonna bring that up myself. Holy cow!
He's killing one of his. He's like killing one of his henchmen for screwing up something about the about who's running Gotham, and he says, "Well," and they're throwing chum in the water, and the chum is the rest of his shredded up family that they have previously killed, and it's like, this is Two-Face now. Two-Face turns people into chum, and he's like throwing the woman's finger with their ring on it, and the kid, and that's what they're chumming the waters for, to get the shark before they throw the guy in. And I'm like, this is too much. This is beyond Hannibal Lecter.
And I think there can be a place for some of that level of content within a Batman book. I mean, like Zhaj, for example, right?
Yeah.
You get Abattoir. You've got
But it's like all of them now.
Yeah, but the thing is, and like I said, I think that started. I mean, it was definitely in stone in the New 52. Joker pulling his own face off, all that kind of stuff. But I think that the seeds of that were spread before that, and I think a lot of it is the over reliance on Arkham Asylum as the place where the bad guys go instead of
Blackgate, right?
Well, right, and that was the thing is, so that was like, before the Cataclysm, you had Blackgate and you had Arkham, and so you kind of have this two institutions set up for it, and it made the world seem real and livable. But
I'm sorry. the Blackgate. Before we did this, I just watched Chuck Dixon's new video talking about the Blackgate Isle of Men, that special that they put out, and how nobody had said the title out loud. But Blackgate Isle of Men. It's like, it's about guys in prison. Or do you want to buy some copies of Blackgate Isle of Men? And they're like, it's called what? No. It's Isle of Men. That may have failed for a reason.
So here's the question.
Sorry, you're saying that, just saying Blackgate. Just I'm sorry.
No,
I didn't mean to distract
anyway.
you.
But that's part of it. So we have the shorthand. But okay, so here's back on topic, right?
Yep.
Another example of the idea that all of the villains are crazies, right, is from Tim Burton's films. Even though nobody survives, all of the villains in the Tim Burton series, they're nuts. Every single one of them,
they're super nuts.
With the exception of Mr. Freeze, who has the Batman the Animated Series origin.
They did, but they made him about as nuts as they could with that origin.
Wait! I thought Tim Burton only did the first two.
He's not crazy, right? He's zany. He's not crazy. Those aren't the same thing.
I guess.
But that is
as a certified zany person, I'm going to stand on this little tiny hill.
Okay, that thin veneer of
So here's the thing.
Okay.
I heard a YouTuber talk about this recently. I'm not sure how much I agree with it, but I think we can probably say this is absolutely how Bruce Timm, wrote his stuff during the cartoon. And that is, he said all great Batman villains should, basically hold up a mirror to Batman himself and who Bruce is and the struggles he faces inside. Is it possible that Bruce accidentally, basically inadvertently, started a system by which you judge your villains by their social and or mental situations, and it just caught on and never went back.
Yes. I think there's a big misunderstanding in terms of the general populace and in terms of the professional writing class about the nature of Batman as a mentally unwell person. And I think that's caused people to double down on the idea of all of that.
And it's funny you bring that up, because I also think that it also, I don't know if it mirrors, but it certainly correlates. If it's not causal, there's at least a correlation between how the mental health of our. I know, to bring it back to Jim Tuner's joke, we live in a society, but we actually do live in a very mentally mental illness has increased. Mental illness has become an accepted sort of increase. Like, I'm proud of my mental illnesses now. And so the idea...
Well, it's been, I mean, to get totally conspiratorial, it's been engineered intentionally that way.
Yeah.
So of course people are proud of it. They've been working at it for 50 years. We finally have a society full of crazy people.
It patterns. There's a pattern you can correlate to how that gets depicted in
totally fits with Harley Quinn.
In entertainment, yeah. And therefore the portrayal of not just the villains of Batman, but Batman himself has to be a crazy.
Right.
Yeah. Which, to address Jim Tuner's point on this, because I think that ties right in, says don't blame Tim Burton for Chuck Schumacher's Batman. While that's a fair point, the fact of it is by Batman Returns, we already have a Batman who is unfit, and that whole relationship with him and Selina are two desperately ill people trying to find their way through things while dealing with their own issues. Bruce is obsessed with justice. Selina is obsessed with vengeance, and so that's and they're both looking for some way to become whole. And so that's already a theme within the Burton films before we get to the actual psychiatrist who's the love interest in Schumacher's first film.
Right.
So it's already coded in this neo-Freudian way. So
this is about things from other media being put into the comic books. For those of you who just joined us, I don't know when the last time was we were talking about that.
Well, kind of now, because I was talking about how I think that Burton and Schumacher's portrayals have definitely infected the way Batman has been written.
True. And when you try to say that Batman doesn't kill people, they go, "Oh, but he does. He does in the Batman movies." And it's like, yeah, that's why we don't like them. That's why we go, they didn't get that right. But
see, that's the annoying thing for me, though, is because Batman's no-kill rule ticks me off so much, yet somehow every time they actually do have him break that rule in one of the movies, they do it in such a horrifying way that I should want it, and now you've just made it worse.
Well, anyway, I'm not going to talk about the no-kill rule, because we will talk for an hour about the no-kill
rule.
I wanted to talk about John Stewart, who he was a angry young man when he first is given the ring, and then they had him become an architect. And then that's really boring. And I know some of you disagree.
You're talking about Green Lantern?
Yes, John Stewart, the Green Lantern, yes.
And I love architecture. It's one of our great art forms.
That's
and
fine.
It makes perfect sense. And it makes perfect sense in the framework of a person using a weapon that is designed to make complex or any structure you can imagine.
Is that why someone brought up architecture in the
yes,
it was me. It was me. I was saying that, when we were discussing about what to talk about, I was saying that John Stewart was a boring architect, and you could say, but that's so interesting for the ring. You never see him designing. Yes. Since Jeff Johns came back and really leaned on the architect thing, because he was also leaning on the fact that Kyle's an artist. The thing about Kyle Rayner was that he never did the same design twice, which was an interesting idea, because all Hal Jordan has was baseballs and baseball gloves and jets. And
the architect thing showed up in Mosaic a couple times. too.
Okay, fine. I'm just saying it doesn't make him a visually interesting Green Lantern. And when he was on the animated series, they gave him a military background and a completely different personality.
Mm-hmm.
And because he's always been kind of boring and nobody knew what to do with him, which is why they killed off his wife right after he got a wife. He killed Kat Matui, and then they had what's her name? I can't think of Carol Ferris, the infested Carol Ferris, Star Sapphire. They had Star Sapphire kill her, like in the second issue of Action Comics when Hal Jordan's doing that. So now he's angry and he's alone, and then they had him be overconfident and obnoxious, and he thinks that he can do Cosmic Odyssey alone, so he sends Martian Manhunter away, only to find that the bomb is yellow and he can't do anything about it, and the entire planet explodes. And now he feels really guilty about that for a long time. And so his personality is so... Nobody likes his personality. Nobody really likes Jon Stewart, except for the fact that he is a minority and it's nice having one. But so when they have the Justice League series, it's like, none of this is usable. So they gave him a military background and said that he had been Green Lantern for like 15 years. He's one of the most experienced characters in the animated DCU. Maybe he's been off, planet all this time, which is why there was another why Kyle Rayner suddenly appeared. But that was an interesting thing, and they incorporated the military background into the comic books. That was never part of who he was before.
The funny thing is, I don't remember him ever creating anything like tanks or jets or bombs or stuff. Like, he had the most boring Green Lantern identity I've ever seen, where basically he did the same four things. I think it was like laser blasts, bubbles, shield, and he would stand on a little disc every once in a while.
He never creates anything interesting.
Yeah.
That's a downfall of the show, but I'm just and I don't think it's that he has to have military things be created to be the fact that he's got military. It's more the military discipline.
Yeah.
The disciplined character.
And I can agree, and I can definitely agree with the benefit of having, some sort of regimented background as being part of his character. And I think that's definitely a way of incorporating that into the main universe. But my point is that the Army Corps of Engineers has an entire branch of people that work on designing buildings. And so there's no reason you couldn't have both of those things, and then you could have what you want, and I could have what I want.
Is there a Marine Corps of Engineers? Because he's a Marine, not an Army guy.
I don't know, but I mean, I don't know. Let's find out. Probably not.
Can I just say that
but I know that on some of those
CBs,
forces,
right?
On some of those task forces, they actually will have people from other branches that'll work on them. So
they have the Navy CBs. That's the.
It's not really important. I'm just teasing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I just say that his best moment on that show was from Justice League Unlimited when they were all turned into kids. And suddenly he becomes this creative, wild-eyed kid who's like, oh, I want to make a giant robot. No, wait, I want to make, it's like coming up with, suddenly he's so many more times creative than he's ever been on the entire show.
So, okay, so now one of the things that as I was going through ideas for the things, I was thinking about times that have ended up shifting the comics or not even comics, right? Because some of these don't have their home. Some characters don't have their home in comics. The Shadow started as a radio show and then was adapted into a series of pulp novels and before it was ever a comic book. And so the Shadow being the Shadow's invisibility, his force of mind must make him invisible, was a visual thing that was done when it was adapted into movie serials, I believe, and then was not in its original media. Was that something that was used when it became a visual media instead of being in novels or in audio plays? Because it doesn't make any sense in an audio play to talk about invisibility.
Right.
You can't see nothing anyway. So that's one of those things that is an interesting one. But but one I think is one of the other things I was thinking about that is kind of also really interesting, to me anyway, was that the Green Hornet got its start as a radio play, and then it was a series of comics, and then there was the TV show in the 60s starring Bruce Lee as Kato, right?
Bruce Lee, that was him, really?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
Wow, I've
So
never watched the
in
show.
in the 90s, Now Comics, at Ron Fortier, who's a guy I know. We're kind of like friends. We don't like hang out a lot, but anyway, point being, Ron Fortier brought this to Now Comics and said, I wanna do Green Hornet, and I have this idea to make it all one thing. And he did this multi-generational epic story with the Green Hornet. And what he ended up doing was making the second Kato, the Kato from the 60s, who was that Bruce Lee character, making him half Chinese. His dad, the original Kato, was Japanese. The son was half Chinese, because Bruce Lee, who played Kato, was himself Chinese, and so that was one of those things that made it from the background or the context of the TV series into the comics, that were then, because the original home for the Green Hornet didn't exist anymore. There was no more radio plays, so they could only live in the comics.
Right.
So that's kind of goes on here, because we're looking at actually, something crossing across genres, or across mediums entirely. So
Now, is the Green? I've never really known anything about him. So, is Green Hornet by any chance connected with DC or anything else?
No.
No. Okay.
He is connected with the Lone Ranger.
Yes, the
Oh,
original.
really?
He is a descendant of the Lone Ranger.
Because what I'd be curious about is someone who came from another media like that, who somehow got absorbed into one of the major already existing universes after that.
Well, the Green Hornet 60s series was produced by the same group of people that did the Batman 66 series.
I was just about to say that there actually is a connection between the two.
Yeah.
They've crossed over in the TV series, and actually Bruce Lee used to live in the same building as Burt Ward, and they would like tumble before they made it as actors. So they actually knew each other when they got on set.
And that's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, Burt Ward had actually told the story that right before they went when they were doing that 2-part Batman episode where the Green Hornet shows up, right before they were supposed to get on set, Bruce shows up and is like really like cold to Dick. I mean to Burt. Dick is not his real name. His real name is Burt.
Yeah.
So Bruce is being real cold to Burt and just like staring him down. And then they've got to do the scene where they're like fighting, and so they're pairing up, and Burt says, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know if I'd done something to piss him off, but here we're supposed to be fighting in front of everybody, and I think he's going to kick my ass, like for the reals.
Yeah.
so right as they got rolling, I can't remember the story completely, but right as the film starts rolling, like Bruce like gets him close and like is being really aggressive, and then I think winks at him, and then Bert's like, oh good God, I thought it was really good to go after. And then they went and had the scene, and it all got caught on film and the whole business. But yeah, they had known each other from before, so that's
Okay.
an interesting thing.
You just reminded me of something. I had been looking this up on IMDb the other day. The cast, of all the guest characters who were on the original '66 Batman, and you just reminded me that Bruce Lee was in that lineup. Yep. I just looked it up, and sure enough. Check it out. Read that name.
Kato. Yeah.
They crossed over.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
I think you're talking about something else.
Nope.
No, that's what he's
I
talking
totally
about.
misunderstood. Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
You're literally never mind.
So those kind of fit into that whole deal, but not entirely. I do want to address something we left behind in the chat a while ago. Fizz says, didn't Hal have a military background, being Hal Jordan? It depends on the version of the character. In the original iteration, he was just a test pilot. I don't think he had been former military. That was elaborated later. And during New Frontier, I know he had been
That's
in the
true.
military and had been kicked out for being a hot dog, and then his job at Ferris was fallback.
Right.
I don't.
Figure out what kind of
Guys, I'm gonna have to
pilot
bounce.
this was.
It's
ahead.
been
Oh, okay.
So,
That's
Sorry,
actually
man.
no, it's all good. But it's a great, very interesting concept. So definitely good for a last minute edition. So I think it was great.
Yeah, it was a really fun conversation anyway. I'm not sure if we engaged everybody, if we gave anything of product of value out to the world, but we had fun. So
That's
thanks
the
for
important part.
thanks for coming while you could, Twitless, and
Definitely.
we'll catch up to you some other time, man.
Good talking to you all. Check out Super School, The Adventures of Omega Girl, and peace. Good to talk to you all.
See you, Twitless.
Yes, yeah.
Yep.
See you next time.
stay
Speaking
tuned.
of the Hal Jordan and the New Frontier. Well, New Frontier was a comic first, so I guess this doesn't count. I was going to say that this is kind of, when they did the animated version of New Frontier, I was thinking that. But yeah, the whole thing with the test pilot thing was, it was passe. It was way past being interesting, which is why Hal had other jobs like being a toy salesman, insurance guy, and things like that. And that was something that I want to say Kyle Baker was it. Am I right? Is that who did the New Frontier?
No, it was not Baker.
No,
it was come on.
I'm getting
He did Catwoman with Brubaker.
That guy was saying.
Oh my god!
I cannot think of the name. I'm sorry.
I was just thinking about his name earlier while we were talking, and I can't think of it now.
But he was talking about how when he was a kid, everybody knew the test pilots who became, were the precursors to the astronauts being the, the one that every kid wanted to
and all those guys.
Chuck Yeager, and so that's why I think they kind of brought back the military thing, because it was kind of a Chuck Yeager thing. And so when they brought Hal back, boy, did they play up his being a pilot and his being it's like, I still don't think our generation cares, or my generation or younger generations cares about pilots the way generations above us did. But
I don't know, man. I was a huge Sky nut for a while when I was 10 and 11. I went to go see an air show down in Tulsa, man, and I was just like, I was buying books about the F-15, and they released the F-18 Hornet shortly after that, and I used to be able to name all those specs on those planes, man. Those
were. As a kid, I was going to be a pilot.
Yeah.
I actually had to
my eyes went bad. That was my plan.
My life and become an artist. I love planes to this day. Here's the thing: I don't know if it works for a character with Green Lantern's powers.
He always ditches his ring. He always ditches his ring before he goes flying, which is all absurd.
Yeah, still, like I can get behind, someone like Green Lantern being an artist because he's a creative person, making him always come up with new ideas.
Yeah,
pilot, I'm just not connecting the two. I could see him maybe being like an astronaut since he's always out there in space.
Right.
He'd be fixing problems, maybe even working on the ring if it were low tech enough. If they didn't want to have it like to be the ultimate, beyond cosmic.
Well, apparently, if you're a 12-year-old Colombian girl, you could just figure it out on your own.
But see, the problem that's a good idea, because I'd actually thought about that if I was reinventing Hal Jordan, he'd at least be in the space program, because that's something that's still going on now. You
could have him crash land, not on Earth. Imagine instead of the alien crashing on Earth, have him crash land on another planet.
Have him crash land on the moon, and Hal just happens to be on the moon. That'd be cool.
I'm just saying, I am so sick of seeing him test jets, because he always makes them crash. I'm gonna push it, and then it crashes, and they go, "Hell!" and he's fine. And it's like, and every one is like $1 billion plane, and he always destroys them.
His job is to test them, though.
Yes.
Well, here's a funny.
It's not interesting. It's not good writing. I don't want to see it more than once.
Yeah.
Every other character has other stuff you can do with their job. There's flying planes and crashing planes, or flying planes and bringing them down successfully. And you're kind of going, "Oh, that's boring." So I don't want to see it again and again. And they brought him back. I really wish they'd just given Hal a good death. He really was a tired character who didn't need to be around anymore.
He's so
they brought
tired.
him back and put him, and they brought back that pilot thing, and they added the military thing much more.
But why do they always
having a
have to
military
kill them off,
past.
though? Couldn't you just have him like grow old and retire?
I'd be fine with
Stories
that.
about the
Well,
military.
see, and
Always bring him back.
here's part of the thing that's so frustrating is they had. I mean, that'd been kind of the move toward things. And it's just that they felt they needed a way to send him off because Hal has always had like a fan base of like rabid fans, right? And DC had been trying to retire Hal for like 15 years. And every time they're like, oh, we're going to give a little more attention to Guy, or we're going to give a little more attention to John and kind of lean on this. There were guys they'd get out their pens and they'd be writing those letters to DC. And like, I don't think you understand how important Hal is. And to be fair, like Hutch, you say you get bored with it, but like the space race came from those crazy experimental barnstorming pilots who were it's like there. I don't know if you've seen the video of that guy who built like a go-kart
doesn't mean I want
rocket.
to watch this every issue.
Well, I know you don't, but I'm saying there are people that they were breathing that stuff at the same time, and so have a guy who goes from working on or to flying the planes to being his own rocket, like for them like that's the next inevitable phase.
Yes, that's Iron Man.
Yeah, well, of course it is. Of course it is. Well, I mean, that's when they did the big DC versus Marvel in like 96 or whatever, 95, 96, whatever it was. Who did they pair up? The battle. It was Iron Man and Hal Jordan, right? It was the way it was. Anyway, the point being though is I totally get where you're coming from with it, but there were people that were just diehard Hal fans, and they wouldn't cotton to him being shelved. But I think that if they would have just done it, I think people would have figured it out. Just like there were so many people that were mad that Barry died in Crisis, yet you have Baron coming in with those great Wally West stories, and people are like, well, maybe I'll give it another month. I don't think I hate it.
Yeah.
I think if DC would have just pulled the trigger, I think they'd have been just fine with bringing in another one.
It took a lot longer. It was really Mark Waid really finally brought Wally West into his own, and man, I was totally fine with him superseding, Barry by that time. But yeah, when quite frankly, I didn't like what. Don't tell him this. I didn't like what Mike Barron did with him. Just he won the lottery and he's like a millionaire. He's got this. He had the crazy girlfriend, the crazy magnetic girlfriend. Then he had a supermodel girlfriend, and then it went through a bunch of writers, and then Mark Waid really kind of when they brought Barry back, and then it was revealed that was a ruse or a mistake.
Oh yeah. The Return of Barry Allen.
The Return of Barry Allen was great, and Wally West was really good in the 90s, and I was fine with it by then. But it took
a big part of that too was that Wade also landed because LaRoque, who had it before, was also was pretty fun. But one of the things that Wade had got, he hit gold because they'd also brought back the JSA just before that. So you got to see Wally, you got to see Jay, he reintroduced Max Mercury, the Quality's Quicksilver character, and so he got to play along with all of that, and he had a really fun sandbox, and I think he did a lot of good with it.
So was that why he had to be called Max Mercury? Was because Quicksilver was his name, but Marvel has Quicksilver.
Yep. And they actually in the book, if you remember this, you can go back and read it. It's like they did say it for a second, but I didn't know who that was because I didn't. They actually refer to him as Quicksilver, and he's like, I don't know what you're talking about, and then they trick him into revealing his powers. Him and Johnny Quick. Jim Jr. says, but we hate it. It was a 10-year-long trial of Barry Allen before the crisis. I don't think it was quite 10 years, Jim. I think it's a bit of
it was from 78 to 85. 80, 70, it's 7 years. I mean,
so it was almost as long as the Clone Saga.
Yeah.
Well, it was only monthly. And there were still some good books in the middle of all that too, but Anyway. So, but yeah.
One other thing that I could bring up that has been incorporated from the media into the comics quite well is that the whole Fortress of Solitude now looks like the one from the Christopher Reeve movie, and all the crystal structure thing is really much more part of Krypton than it ever was before. Yeah, and I like the Silver Age look to Krypton, and they've kind of tried to bring that back, but then also have the crystal thing, and even the look of Kryptonite. It used to be more rock-like, and now it's more crystalline.
Hey, speaking of which, something that was only around for a time, it did not last, but during the New 52, remember how half the characters looked like they were wearing armor all of a sudden?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they had been doing that with at least Batman for decades now.
Yeah.
Right?
As an excuse for covering up the fact that the people have no muscles.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Jim says, "Yeah, I want the gold door and the giant key." There is, I will say that that is there's something fascinating about that. You go back and read those, like the what do you buy, the man who has everything or whatever it is. That just like there's something charming about that.
But the key, they actually did have huge metal markers made for people in planes to be able to navigate around, and then they don't need that anymore. So it's kind of like the phone booth. It's like a relic. If you had it, it makes no sense. But they did something different. I mean, they have a key that's about this big, and it is made of the heaviest substance on Earth. So if
not heaviest substance on Earth, heaviest substance in the universe.
Fine, it's still the heaviest substance on Earth.
I know. I hate it though,
there, and only Superman can pick it up. It's just sitting right by the door.
Yeah. What I hate about that though is knowing that it is so heavy that even an ounce of that would push straight through to the center of the Earth, then turn the Earth into a black hole.
Right. That's ridiculous. Yeah.
Talking about the armor, then the nipples on top make him look real silly. So speaking about Schumacher.
Yeah.
So
we don't talk about that movie.
If Superman's wearing pointy nipple armor under his suit,
I don't know what you're talking about. They didn't make that movie. Nope, it never happened.
Well, Jim would like to argue with you about the giant arrows. You actually need that in the Arctic because the GPS and magnetic compasses don't work.
Okay.
You're right.
There you go. I think he just served you some papers there.
That may be true, but I was reading about them. I mean, I read an article online about them and how they're kind of abandoned. So if that's still true that they need them, I don't know.
Yeah, up north, who knows?
Yeah. Or maybe he's just giving us an excuse you could use in a story.
That could be. Now I do one thing I want to go ahead and wrap up with. Now, one thing we haven't hit on it was that most all of our examples of things that were in the movies that made their way into the comics, with the exception of Nick Fury and the Negasonic Teenage Warhead, were that most of those are DC.
Yes.
Right? Where DC has changed.
How interesting.
I am wondering if we can think of some other examples that are not from DC, because DC's got full of them.
All right, looks like I'm not talking about Catwoman tonight.
Well, we get.
What about the robot? Was the robot part of the Fantastic Four before they did the cartoon and they had to replace the flaming Human Torch? So they just had a robot and then they had to incorporate that into the universe?
I don't know. That's a good question.
I mean, I do know that they finally put the Hall of Justice from the Super Friends into the Justice League, so the 70s cartoons do kind of have an impact no matter when they integrate it. All right, later.
Here's one for you.
This says the robot was made for the cartoon. So
yeah, so there you go. Oh. Isn't that part of the? I'm not a Marvel reader. Isn't he part of Marvel now?
Yeah,
I mean he exists in some way. Yeah.
Yeah, Jim
robot.
Jim Tooner also says that Herbie the Robot wasn't invented for the cartoon and then made it its way into the comics. So there you go. That's one.
There you go.
Okay. All right. This is probably the elephant in the room here, but while I know for a fact that Tony Stark was, a jerky, alcoholic, problematic, sarcastic person before the movies, that they have to have, once Robert Downey Jr. made that character popular for the world,
Yeah.
You know they have to have been trying to recreate that in the comics ever since, right?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some of it they've kind of leaned back on it. See, Iron Man is one of those characters who like is kind of weird because like so much of Iron Man's story has been about his personal character development. Um and then by the time that they started making Marvel movies, they had kind of done everything you could with Tony, and he jumped the shark like a bunch of times. They got to the point of it's like, okay, well, we're gonna something happens and Tony Stark's de-aged to being a teenager, and then he's like, you know, the kid president kind of thing, where he's, you know, he's got all this, he's got the brains of a 40-year-old man, but the vigor of a young man, and he's
Is that where
going
Armored Adventures came
impulsive.
from?
Tony Stark was originally supposed to be Howard Hughes in the 60s. Yeah, very
Yeah.
true. And so you have that kind of thing where they kind of jumped the shark with Tony and had done like anything they could to try to make him more relevant. And even the Heroes Reborn version of Tony Stark didn't really catch on in the way that they wanted to. When you get that fast talking, like cocksure Robert Downey Jr. playing him, they can only go back to like peak Tony Stark. There's nowhere left for the character to develop anymore. And because Marvel has the ironic thing about Marvel Comics is that Marvel Comics is supposed to be about the characters first, right? They're supposed to have real struggles and develop real growth and all this other kind of stuff. But they also won't let anybody get old or die. So so you can't have anytime somebody starts to grow up too much, something has to go to set them back to being obnoxious teenagers or maladaptive adults or
Are
whatever.
we really going to start talking about One More Day again? Really?
No. I'm just going to allude to it because it's not just the One More Day thing. I mean, like Demon in a Bottle, right? The big Tony's just a drunk story. They built up to that, and I'm not familiar enough to give like a huge breakdown of it. They built up to that being a problem in the story, and it had to do with armor war and all the other kind of stuff that was going on there. But then Tony gets better, and he becomes, he gets back into himself, and he gets all of his tech back, and he becomes this formidable leader, and he's just the man for a while without too many hangups, just doing adventure stories, and then they're like, oh, there's nowhere left to go, and people aren't buying their comics, so it's not interesting anymore. So we're going to make him a teenager, or we're going to make him, taking over. His dad's not dead, or whatever kind of weird things they have to throw in there to try to make it a thing again.
So he's a character you just don't know where to go with him anymore. But at the same time, the movies have made him popular, and you're trying to like, how do you make that reflect, because everybody wants to go read the comics,
right? Exactly.
And then there are some writers that seem to have some sort of hang up with Tony being like the alpha male cocksure kind of character, so they have pages and pages of like self-immolation and emotional drivel.
Well, it is the 2000s. Yeah. That's the problem that Marvel's had, is that these movies came out and everybody's like, oh, these characters are really cool, but if you go to the if you do find your way to a local comic shop, you even know those exist, and you go like, hey, I'd like to go check this out. Well, you either have to send them the classic stuff, or there's really nothing. It's like half the characters on the shelves are going by that name, but there's somebody else under the mask.
Well, and even the ones where they've gone back and reinvested some of these other characters with the correct identities, they have people that come in and write them that can't pick up where they left off. And Fizz says movies can't even adapt the character aspects of Marvel. But part of the issue is that they were doing that. Right? But the fact of the matter is they don't, the writers don't value the good, the true, and the beautiful aspects of those characters. So even the adaptations can only last so long until they have to deconstruct them and show how they're problematic and all that other kind of stuff.
Right.
Perfect example of this was Captain America, who was spot on for almost all of the iterations of Cap that were on the screen up until Endgame. And in the beginning of Endgame, Cap's, sitting in this room with all of these people talking about how, terrible it was that they've been living in the world after the snap and la da 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 da. And he's just defeated. Cap is never defeated. Cap never doesn't have a plan. Cap never goes in. It was like one of my big problems with the end of the Civil War, not the movie, the TV, the comic, was that Cap stops in the middle of this giant battle and says, "Oh my God, what have we done?" No, Cap doesn't do anything without a plan. So there's never going to be a moment like where what have we done? Cap counts the cost before he goes into battle. He knows what the acceptable losses are. He's already prepared for it. If we die, we die, and if we win, we win. And here's where it's going. He's a tactician. So that was Cap's died in the comics when that moment, not when he was shot, but that moment where he says, "Oh my God, what have we done?" Cap died on screen where he's in Endgame where he's got this hopelessness that's in there. It's just like one of these things where it's just nonsense.
See, I can actually give it to them for Endgame specifically because of what they've been through and the massive loss that, he huge failure that he experienced basically. And now it's been 5 years of that.
Yeah,
I can actually see that kind of character development, at least on screen. Because that's in the movies, you have that short time to work with stuff. You do need to actually tell a story. I'm willing to give them that.
See, the problem is that 5-year gap is unacceptable. It's absolutely unacceptable within the context of who these characters are, right?
See,
I've been living in a completely different world for 5 years.
I wondered why you didn't like Endgame, and because I love those two movies.
Yeah.
But I'm not a Marvel fan. I'm not a Marvel reader. I have no preconceptions about Cap and who he is, and all this stuff that you've been saying about that's who Cap is. I never read his comics, so I don't know that.
Yep. See, that's one of those things where like every single story decision in Endgame was contrary to what's been established previously in the movies and in the lore that the movies were built on. Every single character decision that was in there. And that's one of the things that really bothered me about Endgame. And it was just like laughed off. One of the things is like the Infinity Stones where like I destroyed them. No, you can't destroy the Infinity Stones. The Infinity Stones were created as an analog of the universe by the creation of the universe, and to destroy the Infinity Stones is to destroy all of existence. You can't destroy the Infinity Stones. That's one of those things where it's like even the idea we have to go get the other stones for other timelines. No, you don't, because there are no other timelines if you destroy the Infinity Stones. That's what makes them the Infinity Stones.
So when just about Civil War, isn't it my understanding that like Cap and Iron Man are on completely wrong sides from where they were in the comics?
Well, sort of, yes, sort of. No.
I just watched that movie yesterday.
Yeah, sort of yes, sort of no. So in the one of the things that the movie does that is not in the comics is that in the movie, the need for hero registration is Iron Man's fault, and he doesn't take responsibility for it at all.
Okay,
right? In the comic, it is other people's fault. There are a group of heroes that are written out of character so you can have a tragic event that kills an entire Midwestern town full of people. And then Tony stands up and says, well, we need to have registration because I can't believe I didn't notice this. We're all too powerful. We're like, every one of us is a firing gun. We need to submit to government authority. And Cap says, well, Tony, that sounds like some commie bullshit.
Yeah.
And they have the same kind of pro-registration, anti-registration aspects in the movie, but the some of them don't side up the same way as they do in the comic books as far as the other characters, but the nature of the reason why is different.
Yeah,
in the movie, part of the reason that Cap is on the anti-registration side is because he's still trying to redeem Bucky, and so that's part of his arc that's still going on from the Winter Soldier movie.
Okay,
so he's still trying to redeem Bucky. Meanwhile, Tony's trying to obfuscate from his own responsibility in being a bad person who makes bad choices and is a total selfish ass. So, I don't like. I mean, after Iron Man 3, he really should have died in Iron Man 3, and it would have been a better story. Because
Wait, hang on a second. Let me talk for a second. So, in Civil War, I just rewatched it last night.
yeah.
It's like Tony Stark is going, oh, we need to have the government telling us what to do, and it's like this is the guy who was telling the U.S. military, no, I'm a freelance. You don't control me. I'm in charge of my armor, and he went to that whole that's Iron Man 2. This is complete reversal from Iron Man 2.
Yes.
Now he's like, we need a super government, the UN, telling us what we can do and what we can't do, and that's what we should do, and it's all based on just the fact that a supervillain set off a bomb and then somebody shielded it from killing a whole bunch of people, but in throwing it away, it went too close to a building. And it's like, it's not, it's not a great movie.
Right.
Go
I
ahead.
actually liked it, and I cannot stand the comic. So that may be part of it. I'm just comparing the two. One thing I will say that is that comic, the strange phenomenon here, whether it's the comic or the movie, no matter what side Tony takes, it doesn't seem to make sense. I don't know why his character seems to be so complex or so simple that there's never a good answer for how he should take this. I just can never seem to put it. It's like, no, that doesn't work either. Because he should be thinking this way and that. And like I've got these 11 different things going through my mind and they're all clashing. And I cannot seem to figure out how he would actually react to any of this stuff.
So one of the things in the MCU, right? The whole scene that they have, where the building comes down and Scarlet Witch has her whole thing. That's one of the events. The other event is the whole Sokovia incident from the second Avengers movie.
Yeah.
Right.
But that only happens because Tony decides he's going to try to create life.
Right.
And creates Ultron. And like, so there is no Sokovia if Tony's not like an egotistic just ass.
Mm-hmm.
And that only happens because he survives Iron Man 3. So if he dies at the end of Iron Man 3, then there is no Avengers 2, and that means that there's no Civil War. So it's really all Tony's fault.
It's hard to believe that there were 3 Iron Man movies before they even made a second Avengers movie. It seems like, you're because that's where he got rid of all the Iron Man suits.
2 Iron Man movies right away.
Yeah,
right. And the thing is, at the end
all the Iron Man suits, and then he got rid of the heart thing, and it's like the end of his story arc. And then all of a sudden, he's just got more Iron Man. It's like, why?
Right. And that's one of the things about 2 that I just hate is that it just makes the end of Iron Man 3. And not everybody liked Iron Man 3. I thought it was a good cap to Tony's story. And even if he didn't die, if he just had honestly retired or whatever, we wouldn't be in that situation. But the other thing is that because Avengers 2 ignores all of the character development that was involved in 3, because part of Tony's panic in 3 and why things are crazy is that he's trying to deal with his trauma over the events of the first Avengers movie. And then and also while he's going through that in Iron Man 3, the sins of his past are catching up to him. And so the whole concept of 3 is making amends and doing it as yourself and being honest and authentic with himself. And so for him to like have to deal without the armor, for him having to get this thing removed from his heart and getting rid of all of his things, that makes the third Iron Man movie is a Lethal Weapon movie. That's probably fair. That's probably fair. But with it, that closes out Tony's story. And if there's never another Tony Stark in anything, that would have been perfectly fine. But he became the cause of every other bad thing that happened in the rest of the universe. So, and then he's self-righteous about it the whole time. And
I don't get that though when you say that, because I mean he's clearly feeling horrible after that lady confronts him.
So okay, at the Sokovia, they have the Sokovia Accords, which are Tony's fault, and he rather than owning it, he guilt trips all of his friends into it, and like, if you don't do it, you're a bad person. And then he hunts down Cap for his dissent, and he starts throwing people in jail with extrajudicial authority and everything else. And then when Cap like says, okay, we're not participating in your thing, and they go underground, Tony blames them for the end of Infinity War when everybody gets dead. He gets back to Earth and he's like, "This is your fault, Cap, for going away." It's like, no, Tony, it's your fault for creating Ultron.
Yeah.
But nobody says anything to him at it, and then they give him the hero's death at the end of Endgame because he's certainly earned it by causing everybody's problems.
Well, isn't that just him making up for his faults?
No, he gets the hero send off. You don't get the hero send off for barely scraping by.
He gives up his own life for everybody else.
If it's his.
It's the least he can do.
It's exactly. It's the least he can do. Okay. Here you are, a wreath of flowers to your wife and daughter, and we never have to hear from it again. No, he gets the absolute Viking funeral ending to the story. He's not the great hero. It's his fault. It's like, okay, did you ever see Flying Tigers? The old John Wayne picture about the fighter pilots, the help of the Japanese. I can't remember the name of the group. There was a bunch of Barnstormer pilots during World War II. Before America was involved, these guys are like, the Chinese are getting their asses handed to them by the Japanese. I got a plane with guns on it that I brought back from World War I. We're going to go shoot us some Japanese. So they go over to China, and they're a volunteer military that are aiding the Chinese and fending off the Japanese. That's real world history. Insert this movie that it tells the story of some of these guys. It's all fictionalized, and John Wayne's a big fighter pilot. During the end of the second act, there's one of the fighters who's not paying attention, and his lack of attention causes one of the other guys to get shot down by the Japanese. And at the end of the story, then he gets browbeaten in the whole deal. I think he may have been drinking or whatever. Anyway, he gets to pull the sacrifice play at the end of the movie and saves John Wayne's life. And that helps to save the battle. End of the movie. He gets the salute for doing it, but that's it. It's not like that's it. Everyone is acknowledged that it's his fault they were in this spell. He got browbeaten. He got called onto the carpet for his lack of attention. The whole business. So it wasn't a situation that it was earned. You had to deal with it. Never in the story does anybody call Tony on account for anything he's done.
Right.
For the whole opus. Except there's in 3, there's some of that from before the movies happened. But as far as from Avengers 2 on, he's never held accountable for anything.
Yeah. He won't even go back and change history because his daughter might not exist.
Yeah.
But half the lives in existence have been wiped out.
So
but he won't just go back and undo that because
that gets to my thing, right? So they break the rules of the Marvel universe so they can have this 5-year gap, so they can tell their time travel story where they make fun of time travel movies that are really good, like Back to the Future. That's not how time travel works. Well, then having a time travel movie that follows the rules of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. I love Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, but it is not a good time travel movie.
Right.
Right.
Okay. The problem is I hate time travel, period. There's no such thing as a good time travel movie.
That is a false statement.
There is such thing as a good movie that happens to have time travel in it, but do not ask me to try to think about the science because it doesn't exist.
Well, it's not the science; it's about the philosophy of it all. Yeah. That's a whole different thing. Yeah, the science doesn't work. Time only flows one way. But in fact, if you start looking at the math behind time, it really gets really crazy. Mathematically, we might not actually have time. But
the ending of Back to the Future doesn't work because the reconstruction, it's like he sees his brother and his sister exist and he exists, and it's like, but then you see a future where their lives play out completely differently. And given how sperm work, it's like none of these people should exist the same way that they were before. Because why are those people even living in the same house if he's a successful?
Well, the whole neighborhood's. Well, here's part of the situation. If you look at it, the whole neighborhood's a better neighborhood than it was in the original timeline.
Yeah.
And because that's the thing is anyway. But that's either here or there.
We aren't talking about Back to the Future.
Yeah,
we've been going for 2 hours and 45 minutes.
We have. So, okay. So we have determined that there are more instances of or there seem to be more instances of the movies influencing the comics in DC than in Marvel. Although I think that there is some change in that because the MCU was so popular. But that's it, man. I think we could probably keep going if we really tried hard, but it is late and we should call it a night. Actually, it's after midnight for you, Cartoonicus, isn't it?
By 9 minutes.
Wow. I am sorry we have kept you on so long. Hopefully it's been
Hey, I mean,
enjoyable.
I had more stuff to talk about myself. We weren't going to get through this in an orderly manner.
What was the Catwoman thing that you had up earlier? We
Well,
really quick. I forgot about
do
that.
we keep going?
How okay, let me ask you, is this a 3-minute conversation or a 15-minute conversation?
I
I
have
don't say anything.
I have an assumption it could be a 30-second statement from me that turns into a 4-hour conversation,
It could be.
like everything else tonight.
It could be. So I guess it's your discretion, say it or not, or we can bring the topic up later, maybe. I know I did ask.
Yeah.
I will say we definitely could. I asked Mark Pellegrini if he'd be interested in coming on tonight because the metal wasn't going to be able to make it. Mark Pellegrini, if you don't know, is the writer of Common America and Black Hops over at Iconic Comics. And he is a wealth of pop culture knowledge. I thought he'd be great to have on the panel. But he couldn't make it. He had prior commitments and he's got a work thing he's getting ready for tomorrow. And he just launched Common America 9 today. So a very big day for them. They funded in like 30 minutes.
Whoa.
Yeah. Anyhow, point being, on 2 platforms. Anyway, point being, if we hold the topic over for another week, so maybe we'll hit it up again in May. Maybe we could have Mark on and have a whole nother set of conversation on the subject. So,
I don't know if I could survive that. I might have to skip that one. Let you talk to him. I was glossing over during some of these conversations. It's like Harley
There's so
Quinn.
much to talk about.
Oh yeah.
yeah, Harley Quinn is a hard subject. Anyway, that's it. That's the show, everybody. We've almost had another show since Twitless left. Got into Endgame. My gosh, that's a long topic. Anyway,
I mean, seriously, how did it take us 2.5 hours to even start talking about MCU?
yeah. Well, we
In
did
a
talk about it a little bit
conversation like
earlier
this,
because we're
right?
talking about the Ultimates and the. Okay, stop it. We're gonna cut it off. We don't need to talk about the talk. Yes, this is true. Mark will
Keep
start
reading
talking
comics.
about feeling. This is exactly true. That is all Mark stuff. Okay, we're gonna call it here. Next week, I believe we are doing my favorite dinosaur comic. I think
All
that's
right.
still on the plan. Although I will tell you secretly that the panel has not shared our comics yet, so it'll be a real fun weekend full of comic reading. Maybe. Anyway, that's it for this thing. We're gonna cut it. Have the gut out there. Read some comics, and hey, go to Global Comics and look for Ideal Comics. We are dropping fresh, new Grabbit strips. Grabbit the Rabbit superhero, written by my boy Taliesin, and with the art as well. I'm editing and coloring it, but it is real fun. So people seem to be liking it. Anyway, we're calling it. Have a good night and get out there. Enjoy the graphic media that we all love so much. Bye.